For the stream to get fired up across the internet, if you are not familiar with the program, we do like to just wait a quick second to make sure that the stream is alive and well before we get broadcasting. And it looks like we are online across the board. So let's get into it. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon this very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. And that's why we're so grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get into. It's going to be a busy week. I hope everybody is buckled in. Before we do, want to say, pause for a quick minute and just remember Martin Luther King. Today is MLK Day. Many people had the day off, and it's one of those days that we just want to pause and recognize that he was a great man leading a great cause, and we're very proud to have this day in remembrance of somebody who did something amazing for other people in the world. So we just wanted to pause and say, just a pause in memory of Martin Luther King Jr. Pretty good day. So let's dive into it. But let me give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to be talking about. It's been a interesting, kind of a slow news day today. We're going to get into everything DC, a lot of Washington, D.C. stuff today because it's going to be a Washington, D.C. kind of week. We're going to start off by talking about what is actually happening there. Over this weekend, we saw this cascade of troops pouring into DC from all over the country, and they are just sort of locking the whole city down in preparation for the inauguration of Joe Biden, which is going to take place on Wednesday. So we've got some information about that. Joe Biden is also going to be sort of investigating or vetting all of these National Guard troops. I want to detail what that is, what's going on with that, and maybe do some analysis on that, get your thoughts on it. The Department of Justice made 7 new high-profile arrests over the weekend. We got some new information from them. Going to go through some of those. We're going to talk about some of the Capitol Hill fallout. The FBI is now probing foreign governments. They're trying to investigate where some of the funding came from for the Capitol Hill rioters. They were getting paid in Bitcoin and sort of these other, sort of questionable sources of income. They're wondering where this came from. The FBI is diving into it. And then other news from this weekend was Donald Trump is trying to put together his impeachment defense team. Rudy Giuliani was over at the White House. Karl Rove was making the news. Lindsay sent a letter over to Chuck Schumer asking him to sort of dismiss the impeachment stuff. And so we want to break into that as well. We're also going to talk about Trump's pardons. A little bit of information is slowly leaking out today, but I think the full list is going to be available for all of us either at the end of the, it might leak tonight, or it's going to be available tomorrow, which is Trump's last full day in office. Remember, he leaves right about noon, I think it is, on Wednesday. So he's expected to release a big list of pardons and sort of wrap up the business for his first term. We're going to see what that looks like. We've got some other leftovers we want to cover. CNN is talking about banning conservative YouTubers, and Twitter is, of course, along for the ride on that. We have some more information about Ghislaine Maxwell. It's going to be kind of a scattered show towards the end of the program, but before we get into all of it, I want to invite you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already done so, we go live at this time every day of the week. We have a lot of fun. We want to make sure that you're notified and here with us. If you're not familiar with the program, the way that this works is we're going to go through a little bit of a presentation. We're going to look at some news articles and some primary source documents, see if we can break down what is really happening in the world around us from the primary source documents, not just the headlines. See if we can add a little bit of meat to the bones of the news, and then we're going to get to Superchats at the end of the conversation. So if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or any messages that you would like to share as we're going through the broadcast, you can just send those in anytime you want. Miss Faith is clipping those, and then we'll address those at the end of the program. So let's go ahead and get into it. Starting off, this story comes from the Washington Post. As I mentioned, DC is just on lockdown. If you've seen a lot of the images, we're going to show you some here shortly, but it's kind of a bizarre scene. You remember on the 6th, we had this really, really wild, as Donald Trump would call it, rally, which turned into a riot, which turned into, many are calling an insurrection. That was a storming of Capitol Hill. And the response to that was just to basically arm all of DC. Last week, we talked about the road closures, the bridge closures. We talked about, I think, 20,000 troops that were sort of being brought into DC to secure the whole area. And largely what many people were speculating was that was for this protest, which was supposed to happen yesterday on Sunday, but it didn't. You may have seen other posters and other articles saying that there was going to be this really overwhelming sort of militia response. Everybody was going to show up to the state capitals, not only to the U.S. Capitol, but also state capitals around the country. And that kind of just fizzled out. Nothing really happened. I think in Arizona, there was like 2 people who went to our Capitol building, may have experienced the same thing in whatever state you're hailing from. But it was supposed to be this really big show of force from a lot of the angry Trump supporters, and then that never happened. And so this article came over from the Washington Post. It says, with no armed march by extremists, D.C. residents navigate a fortress and fear. And like I said, this was from the Washington Post. It said the troops were in formation. The residents were told to stay home. The heart of Washington was a fortress of fences, concrete barriers, security checkpoints. But on Sunday, the planned and promoted, quote, armed march on the nation's capital never materialized. The quiet Sunday brought little relief to a city on edge from attack on the Capitol each day leading up to the inauguration of Biden, with fear of additional violence and ever more security. And then there are quotes from other individuals who are living around in D.C. And let me see, there I am. It says, this came from Charlize Wilson, said, it's as if we were all being held hostage to people who want to bring a lot of chaos to America. She's a 62-year-old Washingtonian who has been to nearly every inauguration since she was 11. On Sunday, she was boarding a train at Union Station that would take her to Florida for a week, where she knew she'd feel safer as a black woman. And this one comes from Rick DeBella, says, I haven't seen it like this since 9/11. At least then you could navigate the streets. A 67-year-old real estate developer who had to ditch his Uber and walk when his driver reached the barrier north of the Capitol. And last week we showed you some images of the road closures, but what happened over the weekend is they just did even more of those. I mean, it's even more lockdown. The last I read that I think there was only like one bridge in and out of DC, at least into the area where you have all of the governmental buildings. You've got the White House, the Capitol building, all of the monuments, the Smithsonian, all of that has just basically been locked down, and they're actually even labeling it like a green zone, using military terminology like you would see in Iraq. Kind of a wild scene, and it just sort of continues to get more and more locked down as we lead up to the inauguration. Another quote came from Abigo, an immigrant from Ghana, said, this is the country that the whole world is looking at. To see the whole place messed up like that, it's a disgrace. So sort of a smattering of opinions here, and some people are a little bit, I think, relieved. Other people are unhappy. This one comes from Hinson Jones, says, I have to say, I feel protected, whatever that means, although the irony is not lost of me. These are the same officers we were demonstrating against a few months ago, saying Black Lives Matter. We were running away from them last month, and this month we're going towards them and saying, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so the whole world is kind of shifting right in front of our eyes, right? We're seeing major things happen, and Washington looks a little bit concerning. Here are some images from the Capitol Hill. I'm trying to adjust my screen over here. All right. And so you can see here, number of officers. Now, many people are saying that a lot of these officers don't even have firearms in there, right? So they're, you can't see it so much from this picture, but some of them have magazines that just don't even appear to be in the weapon itself. So this National Guard soldier looks here. I don't know if there's a magazine in that gun or not, but you're seeing here just temporary fencing put up, some seriously secure fencing. You've got razor wire going across the top, and that's the Capitol building right there in the background. Streets are just totally closed. We have another one. Woman's riding her bike into work or school or wherever it is she's going. We've got National Guard vehicles just sort of posted up, soldiers inside. hanging out really is kind of what it looks like. They're also doing some sightseeing. We got some soldiers around here inside one of these governmental buildings looking at a nice painting and some of the sights and sounds that you'll catch in DC. And then this is our last one where they're just sort of walking down the street. They've all got their masks on and just hanging out. So it's a scene. Now, my thoughts are, on this is, well, this we could interpret this a number of different ways. Many people are saying that this is overly unnecessary, right? That this is just a big show of force, that they're sort of role-playing, that this was a response to them being concerned about the Trumpists, right? That what happened on Capitol Hill, those riots were certainly concerning. This is an overreaction to that. And it's sort of, we told you how dangerous the Trumpers are. And now we've got to just make sure everything is ultimately secured so that those dangerous Trumpers don't come back and cause more damage. And so, certainly on the heels of what happened on the 6th, you might say that sounds pretty reasonable. You want to be extra secure that you're extra sure that your situation is secure. I've been a big critic of what happened on Capitol Hill. I was wondering, why was there not more security around that building on the 6th? And I've had a lot of complaints about that, still do. I'm still hopeful that the FBI, DOJ, and all of the other security agencies get down to the root and figure out what actually happened there. We know that Mayor Bowser sort of disavowed any assistance, any external assistance on January 5th. We know that the chief of police, who has since resigned, Sund, came out and said that he requested more stuff, or he at least had conversations with the sergeant of arms for both the House and the Senate, and they indicated that they didn't want any more help because they were concerned about optics. And so a lot of sort of errors, I think, what were in place before we saw the Capitol Hill riots occur, and now they're trying to prevent that. So certainly not a bad thing. We don't want to see that happen again, because the response has been catastrophic for, I think, the entire country, and in particular, somebody who's interested in free speech. What's happening, I think, is problematic because this is being used as a justification to ban people from the internet, shut down entire web services, and just sort of, in my mind, work backwards when we're talking about free speech, free expression, political involvement, and those types of things. And so we'll see where this goes. I sort of would have guessed that nothing would have happened on Sunday, and nothing did happen. And I think that probably the inauguration is going to go through without a hitch, but certainly you want things to be more secure. And if you do want things to be more secure, the next question would be, why do you have a bunch of soldiers without any firearms just standing around? Is it really for security, or is this just sort of security theater? Well, we're going to figure that out. I guess better to be safe than sorry, right? And Joe Biden is doing the same thing, also just crossing the T's, dotting the I's to make sure that his security is going to be safe. Seen a lot of stories come out over the weekend and today indicating that Joe Biden and his team are going to be vetting all of the National Guard soldiers who are there. All of the troops are, according to the Biden team, they just need to be double checked, a little bit questionable. You might have some straggling Trump supporters in the National Guard, and you know how dangerous that can be. So they're just vetting them. Fearing an insider attack, the FBI is vetting the National Guard troops. This came over from the AP. U.S. defense officials say that they are worried about an insider attack or other threat from service members involved in securing Joe Biden's inauguration, prompting the FBI to vet all of the 25,000 National Guard troops. It's a lot of vetting going on. The massive undertaking reflects the extraordinary security concerns that have gripped D.C. ahead of the January 6th, or as a result of the January 6th insurrection, underscores the fears that some of the very people assigned to protect the city over the next several days could present a threat to the incoming president and other VIPs in attendance. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy told AP on Sunday officials are conscious of the potential threat. He warned their commanders to be on the lookout. Other leaders say they have seen no evidence of any threats, and officials said the vetting hadn't flagged any issues. We're continually going through the process, McCarthy says, and taking second, third looks at every one of the individuals assigned to this operation. There was an interview he gave with other military leaders, went through an exhaustive 3-hour security drill in preparation for Wednesday's inauguration. Guard members are also getting training on how to identify potential insider threats. And so this is a little bit out of the ordinary. Normally, of course, you're going to have security anytime you have a transition, but this is a big show of force. So there's a lot of people here, and they're saying here about 25,000 members of the Guard are streaming into Washington from across the country, at least 2.5 times the number for previous inaugurals. And while the military routinely reviews service members for extremist connections, the FBI screening is in addition to any previous monitoring. So ordinarily, you just go through you're in the National Guard, right? You're going through a formal military branch, but that apparently wasn't good enough or sufficient for Biden and his security team. So they've just decided that we're going to also add in an FBI screening on top of the underlying whatever, that screening, whatever that security clearance process looks like. So they're just doubling down. The Army is looking at which troops, so specifically what troops do require that additional security screening. This came over from the Army Times. See here, this graph over on the right says, and this came from a poll of 1,630 active duty troops conducted by the Military Times in partnership with Syracuse. This happened between October 23, 2019, December 2, 2019. So just about a month old. And it says, have you personally witnessed examples of white nationalism or racism within the ranks of the military? 63%, so about 2/3 say no, 1/3, 36.3% say yes. And the article is saying here that the Army is working to determine which National Guard troops that are assisting on January 20th are going to require additional security checks, more training, and so on over these next coming days. More than 1/3 of all active duty troops and more than half of the minority service members say they have personally witnessed examples of white nationalism or ideological driven racism, according to 2020 survey, which is the one we just covered. So, that's a pretty big number, right? 1/3 of anything is a pretty big number. And certainly it sounds like they're going to be addressing that. The Army spokesman also said the service was looking into whether soldiers participated in the Capitol Hill riots. And a recent FBI bulletin, let me get my screen out of the way, says that the FBI warned for plans for armed protests in all 50 state capitals in the days leading up to the inauguration. The cross-country threat is something the National Guard Bureau chief said he and his staff are also watching, but nothing has happened thus far. They're going to continue to look through this stuff. McCarthy says we're continually going through the process, taking a second, third look at every one of the individuals assigned to this operation. National Guard members are also receiving training on how to find threats within their ranks. The question is that all of them? Are there others? We need to be conscious of it. We need to put in place mechanisms to thoroughly vet these people. The military regularly checks individuals, and to vet Guard members, the FBI would run through names through the Bureau's databases and watch lists to find any concerning associations, including involvement in investigations or terrorism-related issues, which is what the FBI National Security Supervisor told the Associated Press. So kind of an interesting thing that you would have your own soldiers sort of double check, triple check to make sure that they are safe, right? And my initial thought here was, well, okay, that makes sense to make sure that they're safe, but what kind of questions are they going to be asking them is my question. What are they going to be asking? Did you vote for Trump? If you voted for Trump, does that automatically make you a threat? Sort of seems like a political question. You're sort of segmenting your armed services into political camps. If Donald Trump did that, did he do that? If he was asking people whether they voted for Obama and then sort of segregated out that segment of troops, would that have gone over well? Is that what Joe Biden's doing here? Let's finish the article. In a statement, the Army said it is working with Secret Service to determine which service members supporting the National Special Security event require additional background screening. DC Guard also providing additional training service members, reported up their chain of command. No place for extremism in the military. We will investigate each report individually and take appropriate action. Working closely with the FBI, 25,000 National Guard troops are all going to be there. So it's interesting. Why would you want your military to be totally in alignment with your political beliefs and then sort of segment out the ones who are not and label them extremists or security concerns for their political ideology? I mean, I never served in the military, so it's hard for me to speak about some of this stuff. Maybe this is standard operating procedure. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. But it seems like you sort of want a diverse population in your military, something that's sort of reflective of what America looks like. I mean, you would think that it would be sort of representative of that. I think it would be troubling if you just had a very homogeneous military when everybody thought in one political ideology, sort of outside of the normal bounds of what you would want from an American citizen, right? I think all Americans, regardless of your ideology, should love America and want freedom and support, principles of democracy and those types of concepts. So as long as you have that as a baseline, isn't that sufficient? Or now are we talking about having to put you in one particular camp, one particular bucket, one particular group ideology in order for you to be a bona fide military person? All right, that's interesting. Well, CNN had a little clip here. Apparently voting for Trump does make you a terrorist who needs to be moved from the military.
About this on my Twitter account, I guess, and people were reminding people of Anwar Sadat and Indira Gandhi, who were killed by their own people. I was thinking the Guard is 90 some odd percent, I believe, male. Only about 20% of white males voted for Biden. You got to figure that in the Guard, which is predominantly more conservative, and I see that on my social media, and we know it, they're probably not more than 25% of the people that are there protecting us who voted for Biden. The other 75% are in the class that would be the large class of folks who might want to.
Yeah, so if you're white and in the military, it's like only 20% likely that you voted for Biden, and therefore all the other 80% of white guys in the military are Trump supporters, which makes them a threat? Is that not insulting as hell? What do I know? All right, so, okay, let's move on. The FBI, in addition to doing the background checks for all of our troops there in D.C., they're also probing foreign governments to figure out what the heck happened on Capitol Hill Riot Day on January 6th. They're probing them to see if they're funded by extremists who helped to execute the Capitol attack. As a part of the FBI investigation, they're examining payments of $500,000 in Bitcoin to key figures and groups in the alt-right. So Bitcoin is probably going to be under a lot of scrutiny here for a short while. In Washington, the FBI is investigating whether foreign governments helped and planned to execute the January 6th attack. As part of the investigation, they're examining $500K in Bitcoin, apparently by a French national, to key figures in groups in the alt-right before the riot. Those payments were documented and posted on the web this week by a company that analyzes cryptocurrency transfers. Payments of Bitcoin to cryptocurrency can be traced because they're documented in a public ledger. Separately, a joint threat assessment issued this week by the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and various other federal and D.C. area police agencies noted that, quote, Russian, Iranian, and Chinese influence actors have seized the opportunity to amplify narratives in furtherance of their policy interests amid the presidential transition. So I'll be real curious to know, were any of those people involved in the election, or did they just sort of spring into action now? Because we didn't hear much about it before the election or during or even after the election, but we're hearing a lot about it now. So now the Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese are getting involved, but before, not so much of that. Unless you're talking about before 2016. We heard all about the Russians in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Then we kind of had a little bit of a quiet time on that. Now they're back. All right, well, that's fine. So the Department of Justice also was responding to the Capitol Hill riots, and they made a number of arrests between Wednesday, January. I'm sorry, no, this was, this is sort of scattered around. This was published immediately for release last week, but I want to go through some of these. We have here 7 individuals have been charged in the District of Columbia with crimes committed on the U.S. Capitol. We've got Keith Packer. This guy was knowingly entering and remaining in a restricted area. Packer was arrested in Virginia. We have Nicholas Rodin, who was charged with 1 count of knowingly entering and remaining in a restricted building knowingly. So he was arrested in D.C. We have another guy, Aaron Mostovsky, was charged with 1 felony count, 1 theft of government property. And so, we're not sure what that one was. You can see sort of a pattern here of the charges. We see a number of these restricted buildings or entering grounds without lawful authority. You might remember last week we talked about several Capitol Hill rioters who were arrested and sort of lumped into this bucket of Capitol Hill protesters by the media, but they weren't even really there when all of this stuff was going on. So now we're getting more and more individuals who were actually there. We can figure that out based on the fact that they were charged with refusing to leave without entering a restricted building, refusing to leave without lawful authority to be there, and so on. We have another one from Aaron Mostovsky. He was charged with 1 count of felony theft of government property, also arrested in New York City. And then William Pepe. And wasn't Pepe sort of allegedly a racist frog or something like that? I remember listening to that in a Jordan Peterson podcast. He was getting skewered for, I think, holding up a flag of Pepe. And this is a guy, and I think Pepe was sort of associated with the alt-right, allegedly, or it was just a meme that was spreading around, sort of this Trump-ish meme, Pepe the Frog, and kind of hilarious the last time I thought about it. But then Jordan Peterson had that interview, and they thought it was a racist, white supremacist Pepe Frog. I don't even know anything about it other than the fact that it was sort of just floating around the internet. And apparently this guy, this is sort of one of those things where the simulation is sort of winking at you, as Scott Adams would say. He says here, William Pepe was charged with 1 count of knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted buildings or grounds without lawful authority. He was arrested yesterday, also in New York. Another one, Andrew Williams, 1 count unlawful entry, arrested in Florida. Josiah Colt, he was from Meridian, Ohio. Same charges, also arrested in Idaho. Kevin Loftus, also arrested yesterday in Wisconsin. Same types of charges. In addition, 3 other individuals we talked a little bit about. Jacob Chansley. I think Jacob Chansley was the guy. I can't remember which one he was. We talked about a lot last week. We talked about the bullhorn guy. We talked about the podium guy. We talked about somebody who got into a fight with a pedestrian the day after but was still arrested for it. We talked about another Capitol Hill rioter who wasn't there but then got arrested for being in possession of weapons. And so, it's just kind of all over the place. Now, we have more, and they're from all over the country, from New York, from Florida, from Idaho, from all throughout the country. And like they said last week, they're just getting started. One of the FBI, I think the chief actually, I can't remember his name, but he had said something like, we are in the first inning of this thing. And I think that's probably accurate. We can see here that there are a ton of law enforcement agencies involved with this. There's another person arrested, Richard Barnett, arrested on January 8th. 1 count violent entry, disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, theft of public money, property records, and we have additional complaints that have been submitted in federal court with as many as 40 individuals. They were arrested, charged with a number of different offenses, and look at all these agencies involved. U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Columbia, Counterterrorism Section of the Department of Justice National Security Division. We've got the FBI Washington Field Office, U.S. Capitol Police, Metro Police. We have U.S. Attorney's Office for New York. We have FBI in New York, U.S. attorneys in Wisconsin, and so it just goes on and on and on. We're talking about dozens of different offices around the country who are going to be swooping all of these people up. And so just, it's I think, going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to follow along, and we want you to be a part of that with us. So let's change gears yet again. All right, so we talked a little bit about what Inauguration Week looks like. We talked a little bit about what is going on in D.C. We heard a little bit about the arrests that were taking place in Capitol Hill. Let's talk about now what we should get to this week. We'll see if we do or not. Impeachment. Impeachment's going to be probably a hot topic this week. We just don't know yet. Remember, last week, or I think it was last week, that's when the House of Representatives impeached Donald Trump. They read the article of impeachment. In there, we even drafted our own article of impeachment because they set a standard that was so low that it was just very easy to impeach anybody. And we had an impeachment party last week. If you missed that, you can go check that show out. You can download your own template for an impeachment, and you can just impeach anybody, any one of your congresspeople. Super easy to do. All you have to do is identify something where there was a politician who said something, maybe a little bit provocative, said the word fight, said the word, rally, charge, win, get out there and go and, do something. If they said anything along those lines, well, according to the Democrat standard, that can be something that is problematic. And if you can tie that language to a problem that took place after the fact, so they said something and then something bad happened, doesn't really matter what it is. If you can connect the two in any way, shape, or form, boom, you've got an impeachable argument there. You got an impeachable offense. And so if you want, you can download those templates and go impeach anybody, impeach everybody, have an impeachment party. It's a lot of fun. I wrote one for Kamala Harris, and it was very easy. Actually, it took about 15 minutes maybe. So you're free to go do that. Donald Trump, of course, has been impeached, and over this weekend, he was spending some time trying to assemble his impeachment defense team. And there was a lot of murmuring going on around the news saying that he was going to maybe bring on Rudy Giuliani to be his defense attorney during the impeachment proceedings. And, there were mixed reactions to that. Some people thought this was a great idea. Rudy did a good job, according to some people, on the election litigation. He was a strong advocate. He was out there every day in front of the legislature. I mean, a true believer in this stuff. And I will agree on certain instances, he was pretty compelling. I mean, he's not a bad attorney. I think he is somebody who is, when he's on point, he delivers a good message. He can be a pretty articulate guy. And, there are some benefits there. Now, on the other side, people are saying, well, wait a minute. If Rudy is the head of Trump's impeachment team, defense team, this is going to be a catastrophe because Rudy has no credibility. He's lost a number of different court cases during the election litigation that took place just previously. And he's sort of just kind of a fringe individual. And so a lot of speculation was taking place over the weekend. And let's see if we can sort some of it out. So according to this article from the Washington Examiner, Karl Rove, do you remember Karl Rove? Karl Rove was one of George Bush's deputy chief of staff, somebody who many people say sort of the brains behind the operation, sort of like Brad Parscale was to Donald Trump. Many people thought he was the brains behind Donald Trump's 2016 electoral win. People said that about Karl Rove and George Bush. And then after George Bush's 2 terms, Karl Rove went into the media and, wrote some books, did a lot of commentary. And so he's kind of back. I haven't followed him for some period of time, but he was out over this weekend talking about Rudy Giuliani. And he said a Giuliani defense for Trump would raise the likelihood of Republicans convicting him. Veteran Republican warned if President Trump chooses his personal attorney, Rudy, to defend him, it would backfire on him. He was the deputy chief of staff, said he believes Rudy's claim on voter fraud hurt his credibility, and his role in impeachment would drive more senators to convict Trump. With the Rudy defense, there is a strong likelihood that more than 17 Republicans will, because essentially that argument is this was justified. The attack on the Capitol in the attempt to end the congressional hearing on certifying the election was justified because of all these charges are true. Frankly, they are not. So what Karl is saying here is that if Rudy were to be brought into the impeachment defense of Donald Trump, that he would essentially just say, yeah, right, all of the alleged election fraud was actually true, which hasn't been proven in court. And that would cause a lot of the GOP senators to say, no, it's not. And so they would be tying their vote against their vote to impeach President Trump would sort of be connected. It would be like a referendum on their position on whether or not there was electoral fraud. So it's sort of enmeshing the two too closely together. And I can understand that argument. He goes on, he says, convicting Trump in the Senate requires 2/3 vote or 67 senators. The Senate will be split 50-50 with Democrats and the 2 independents who caucus with them having a tiebreaker with Kamala Harris. By the time of a Senate trial, Trump will already be out of office and succeeded by Biden. Republicans like Rand Paul, they said that if they vote to convict Donald Trump, it would have major consequences for the party. Rove touched on the divisions within the party, suggesting it would be years before it would come back together. It needs to rebuild. It needs to find a way to take the traditional Republican coalition and bring it in and keep as much of the Trump supporters, ordinary voters who cared about him taking the establishment and taking on the elites. Rove said, but the Republican Party, let's not kid ourselves, it is in the midst of a civil war. Which is true. I think I've said that on this channel. So on this, Rove, I think, has a point about Rudy being a little bit too toxic for a lot of the GOP senators. And if the argument there is that the underlying electoral fraud was legitimate, therefore Donald Trump should have encouraged the crowd to go and storm the Capitol, that would be a pretty bad argument in my mind, right? In other words, the Capitol Hill riot was justified because there was a significant underlying electoral fraud, and the only way to right that fraud was through violence and storming the Capitol. It's a pretty bad argument, but I'm not so sure that that would be Rudy Giuliani's argument anyways. I think Karl Rove here is sort of creating a straw man where he's saying this is what the argument would be. And I'm not sure that that is the case. Would Rudy go in there and do that? Or would he just make sort of the baseline constitutional argument that we've all made, or that at least I've made on this program and that I've read elsewhere, that, this wasn't incitement. I mean, you can get out there and say political things, doesn't necessarily cause incitement. Donald Trump's speech, we ran through the speech last week. We went through all the scary words, or at least sort of a handful of scary words that people were throwing around in the media. Donald Trump said the word kill or killing 3 times in his speech. What was he talking about? He was saying that other senators were telling him to dump Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court confirmation hearing, because people were saying, he's killing us, he's killing us, he's killing us. Okay, that's what he was talking about. He wasn't going and talking about killing Congress people. Same thing when he was talking about fight. He said fight 23 times in that speech. Did he say go and fight your Congress people and punch them in the mouth and storm the Capitol? No, he didn't. He was talking about primary fights. He was talking about fights with the media. He was talking about political momentum, going out there and fighting like hell, or you're not going to have a country anymore. A lot of the same language that other people have said. And so you could make those same arguments here. And Giuliani, I think, would have been perfectly capable of doing that. He could have gone through and he said, this is constitutionally, this is an incitement. This isn't a high crime. This isn't a misdemeanor. This is political language. And Donald Trump is entitled to follow the rules of the Constitution just like anybody else is. Just because they don't like the fact that the Constitution says that you can count electoral votes in Congress. They may not like that. They may think that this has not been done ever, has been done, a handful of times in our history. What we saw start on January 6th was perfectly lawful, perfectly within the bounds. That's why it started before the Capitol Hill riots occurred. So you have to sort of define what the rules are in an impeachment proceeding and then show that Donald Trump broke those rules. I'm not sure that they've done a good job defining those rules. Therefore, how can they come to that conclusion if they're going to do anything that's not a political trial? If this is an actual trial where you have due process, you have to present evidence, you can cross-examine evidence, and it sort of has a lot of the same indicia of what we see in law, then maybe it will resemble a fair trial. But if it's just a political show, then there is no real trial. It's just whatever standards you think are appropriate. They've already shown us, the Democrats have, the country. They've shown the country what their standards are. And they're pretty low. That's why you can download a template and draft your own article of impeachment in about 15 minutes if you are so inclined. Giuliani, however, says that he is not going to be a part of the defense team. So there was a lot of speculation about this. Karl Rove was questioning it. Many people were taking pictures of Rudy as he was sort of skating in and out of the White House. And lo and behold, late last night, we learned, or actually I think this was today, we learned that he is not going to be a part of the impeachment defense team. President Trump's lawyer, Giuliani, here says that he is not going to be a part of the team. He gave a speech. He said, I'm a witness and therefore unable to participate in court or the Senate chamber. Giuliani, who hasn't responded to requests for comment, claimed Friday that he was, quote, involved with preparing Trump's defense. But a campaign spokesman said Trump, quote, has not yet made a determination as to which lawyer or which law firm will represent him. The House Judiciary Committee last week said it retained lawyers Barry Burke and Joshua Matz to support impeachment efforts. Both took part in the last impeachment, which culminated in the Senate acquitting Trump. But since House Speaker Nancy Pelosi hasn't transmitted the articles of impeachment yet, a trial can't start. The Senate is out of session, but is reconvening on the 19th, which is tomorrow. So we'll see if those articles make their way over to the Senate so that the trial can start tomorrow. And I think even Mitch McConnell has said that even if they get him tomorrow, it's unlikely that it's going to get started tomorrow because of procedural rules. So the earliest it might start would be Wednesday, January 20th, after Trump has already left the White House, in which case he's no longer in office. So how do you impeach a president who's not in office anymore? Well, if you look at the Constitution, what I have been reading a lot is many people are sort of forgetting some of the removal from office language that comes out of the Constitution. My argument last week was, look, if he's out of office, then he's out of office. And if the primary purpose, let's say, that we can glean from the text of the Constitution is impeachment is for removal, if somebody's already removed, what's the point of the underlying lawsuit? Sort of like what we were talking about with the election litigation. Many people were saying, well, we're just going to continue to sue. And a lot of those lawsuits were dismissed because the courts came back and said, the election has already been certified. You're asking for us to reverse the course of the election. It's already been certified. We can't do that. the remedy that you're claiming that you want, you have a harm and you have a proposed solution. The solution here is not possible. The solution here, the state has already been certified. So there's nothing we can do about this. Thanks for filing your lawsuit, but there's nothing we can do. Your lawsuit is moot, and now you're gone. You're out of here, right? And those lawsuits have been dismissed largely across the country. And many people were celebrating. Any of the anti-Trump people were all just very thrilled that these lawsuits are going down sort of in spades. Mark Elias over at Democracy Docket was also indicating that. He said, every day he posts up there, Trump is 1 in 65. Trump is 1 in 66 in his post-election lawsuits. So, that type of concept could also apply to impeachment, where now you're saying, all right, we're trying to remove somebody from office. That person has already been removed from office. So what's the basis of the underlying complaint? In this case, the article of impeachment, which was seeking to remove him from office. But now the talking point is kind of shifted a little bit. If you read the full text of sort of that impeachment clause in the Constitution, there's another section there where it's talking about preventing that individual from running from office again. And that is where I think the momentum here has shifted from the Democrats who do want to impeach him. I think that they're still very gung-ho about this. It's not for removal purposes, but instead it's for the preventing him from running again purposes. And they're using textualism, which is nice that they're actually reading the document, and they're using the language that's within the document to come to a conclusion. And it is in there, right? And that's part of the language. So we'll see where that goes. We're going to show you a letter here from Lindsey Graham in a minute where they're basically arguing that it should be thrown out. Before we get there, let's take a look at what Karl Rove has to say. Here he was on Fox News Sunday. This was yesterday. He's here with Chris Wallace and Juan Williams and somebody else. Let's listen in.
And Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Karl, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says that he is keeping an open mind about the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. A big difference, sharp difference from his clear opposition from the very start of the first impeachment trial just a year ago. What do you think, Karl, are the chances that 17 Senate Republicans, and that's what it would take, if all of the Democrats vote for conviction, 17 Senate Republicans would vote to convict Donald Trump and remove him? Well, he'll be removed from office, but to keep him from running again.
Well, normally we'd say not much chance, but I think Leader McConnell's statement is a sign that every Republican senator needs to take this seriously. And I think it's all going to boil down to what's the president's defense. Rudy Giuliani charted a very bad course for the president in the morning papers when he suggested that the argument was going to be, well, there couldn't have been incitement because all the charges of widespread voter fraud are true. Well, those charges and the so-called experts that the campaign has mustered to advocate them have been rejected by over 50 courts, with judges appointed by President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, and I think even one Reagan justice. So if it's the Rudy Giuliani defense, there is a strong likelihood that more than 17 Republicans will, because essentially that argument is this was justified. The attack on the Capitol and the attempt to end the congressional hearing on certifying the election was justified because all these charges are true. And frankly, they aren't. They have been given every opportunity to prove them in a court of law and have failed to do so. So I think it really boils down to what's the defense that the president is going to make. And if it's Rudy Giuliani's defense, I think it raises the likelihood of more than 17 Republicans voting for conviction.
Yeah, not a good defense in my mind. If that is truly where they're going with this, it's not going to work out well, in my opinion. Not a good idea. It's sort of like that defense. If I'm a criminal defense attorney, as you know, if somebody punches somebody else and our defense is our client's charged with punching somebody, and we go into the judge and we say, well, Your Honor, yeah, I mean, he hit him, but that guy deserved it, right? That's not typically a good defense. Guy may have deserved it. Okay, anybody in that same position may have wanted to hit that guy, but if it's still a violation of the law, it's a violation of the law. And so it's not a perfect analogy, but you get the gist here. If Rudy Giuliani and Trump's impeachment defense team goes in there and they say, hey, Congress, you guys deserve this because you didn't look into it well enough, or you didn't investigate electoral fraud, and we told you there was going to be a lot of electoral problems and you didn't do anything about it, therefore you deserve what you got here. It's not going to work out well. So I can't imagine that would be where the defense goes, but we'll see. There's been a lot of other wild things coming out of Trump's teams. So here is Lindsey Graham, as promised. This is his letter to Senator Schumer. A little bit of a long one, but I want to go through it. He says the Senate should vote to dismiss the article of impeachment once it is received in the Senate. We will be delaying indefinitely, if not forever, the healing of this great nation if we do otherwise. And I love all these people talking about healing. I think it's nice. I think it's naive. I don't think that's going to happen. I think both sides of the country are pretty much ready to go to battle. But, healing and peace is a good thought. We'll see where that goes. Here is Lindsey Graham's letter. He sent this over on January 17th, so that was yesterday. He says, as you said, on January 6th, the attack will live in infamy. The attack on Capitol Hill will live in infamy, using some of that Pearl Harbor language. Those who were complicit in the attack will be held accountable. Congress can be proud that it is going to fulfill its constitutional duty to certify Joe Biden. Vice President Pence stood in the breach against unconstitutional calls for him to overturn the election and defend the Constitution. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, likewise rejected those same calls. Virtually all of us rejected further challenges to the 2020 election. So you see what he's doing here. That's kind of a nice little, hey, I know you're mad at all of the Republicans, but don't be mad at all of us, okay? It's just a couple of those guys on the outskirts. We're just talking about the Ted Cruzes, the Josh Hawleys, some of the representatives like Mo Brooks, and so on. But it's not us. I know you're the majority leader now. We weren't part of that crew. Lindsay, he says, okay, but now in your first act as majority leader, rather than begin the national healing that the country so desperately yearns for, you seek vengeance and political retaliation. While the vice president and the Senate Republicans rejected unconstitutional actions, you seek to force upon the Senate what would itself be but one more unconstitutional action in this disgraceful saga, the impeachment trial of a former president. The plain text and the evident purpose of Congress's constitutional impeachment power make manifestly clear that Congress is without the constitutional power to impeach a president once he has left office. And we talked about this last week. We went through a different article from another former judge who was one of the appellate judges for the Fourth Circuit for something like 15 years. And that was his conclusion as well, that the primary purpose of the impeachment clause is to remove somebody from office. You have other things that you can do if you want to pursue criminal charges against somebody, like pursue criminal charges. That's why we have a criminal system. We have a civil system for civil lawsuits. We have family court for family law issues. We've got juvenile court for juveniles. We've got drug court for drugs. We've got criminal court for crimes. And we have impeachments for removal from office. And so that's sort of where this trend was going. The idea here is that it's just for removal. And there are other mechanisms that you can use if you want to pursue criminal charges. So what he says is the impeachment power exists to protect the nation from the harm that an incumbent president might inflict upon the nation were he to remain in office, not to vindicate political grievances after a president has left office. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution does read, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the U.S. shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And high crimes and misdemeanors here would be one of the big broad category that this incitement or sedition charge would be lumped into. Article 1, Section 3 similarly reads, judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office. See, that is the first part that the judge was sinking his teeth into when we were analyzing this last week. It shall not extend further than to removal from office. Article 1, Section 3. So if somebody's already removed from office, if Trump has already left, you can't remove him anymore. Therefore, what is the basis of the underlying allegations? What's the basis of that? Because the remedy has already been accomplished. Therefore, the underlying problem is now moot, apparently. But this is where they're sort of falling into that second subset, that second part of the sentence, where they're saying so it shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. The two remedies, and that's the second part. Okay, so they're saying, yeah, well, he's already removed, but now we don't care about removal. We care about this second half and disqualification. That's what they really want to sink their teeth into. The two remedies, Lindsay says, for impeachment, removal, and disqualification are only remedies for an impeachment that is constitutional, which a trial of the former president would not be. They are not separate remedies for two different constitutional impeachments. The one for a president who is incumbent in office and the other for a president who is no longer incumbent in office. If a Senate trial is not constitutional, then the remedy of disqualification is unavailable to the Congress as a punishment for the unconstitutionally impeached president. Right? And the Democrats are probably going to say, well, that's all well and good. We want to sink our teeth into that second phrase. Disqualification from future office. But Donald Trump is, if he's not in that position, then he's not subject to a trial. Then he cannot be subject to a penalty that would result from a trial. So you're just sort of connecting the chain. Lindsey Graham is saying you can't do that. He says here, if the Senate trial is not constitutional, the remedy of disqualification is unavailable to the Congress as a punishment for the unconstitutionally impeached president. It cannot be that the framers intended to empower Congress to disqualify any former officer it would like, whenever it would like, and with no investigation. And of course, they did not. The two constitutional remedies for impeachment are available only when an official has been impeached by the constitutional impeachment process set forth in the Constitution. The disqualification remedy is available for a constitutionally impeached official as an additional option to Congress. It is not itself support for an unconstitutional impeachment. So think about the alternative here, right? If somebody is in office, then you can remove them from office, and an additional penalty can be they cannot run from office again. If somebody has been already removed then from office without an impeachment, the first thing that you would need to do is remove them, then disqualify them. If you cannot remove them because they're already removed, then that subsequent penalty of further future disqualification cannot be imposed here, according to Lindsay's argument. And I think that actually does make some sense, right? If somebody is no longer in office, then the check, and you always want to be sort of asking yourselves for checks and balances. And if this is something that was allowed to stand, would the American people have a remedy to prevent Donald Trump from ever running for office again, right? If Donald Trump is not ultimately impeached and disqualified, is there anything that the American people can do to prevent him from running from office again? Well, of course, right? It's just don't vote for the guy. It's the next time he runs for office, you put up a good candidate, run a clean election, prevent him from winning election again. It's a pretty clear thing, right? You can do that. And he's no longer in office, so he doesn't have the power of the office to sort of usurp some of the other checks and balances. He's no longer in office, therefore he's a private citizen again, and no longer has the powers of the presidency. So he can't manipulate his way into doing something unlawful or illegal, allegedly, right? They're saying that that's not a safe enough check on preventing Donald Trump from running again. They want to make it very clear he's not going to be running for office ever again, which is why they want this impeachment to go forward. He says, Leader Schumer, proceeding with the spectacle of the impeachment of a former president is as unwise as it is unconstitutional. Where does this all end? When the Republicans in the 115th Congress had control of both chambers, should they have impeached and disqualified President Obama from future office for his handling of Benghazi? Should Democrats now just, quote, go ahead and disqualify Trump administration officials from future office while they hold both chambers just because they believe they can? Well, yeah, that's what they're going to do. He says the Senate's attempt to disqualify a president from future office who is no longer in office would be an unconstitutional act of political vengeance. He's dead right about that. And not a righteous constitutional act to protect the nation by removal of an incumbent president. Such gratuitous, meaningless effort by the Senate is neither worthy of our great institution or service to the people. It will incite further division. Incitement. Do you understand that? Do you see that right there? This is impeachable. If there's further violence, and Lindsey Graham here is acknowledging that, and he's a senator, he's been a senator for a long time. He's saying here, if Chuck Schumer moves forward with this thing and there's more violence, that's incitement. According to the Democrats' own standard, if you do something and something bad happens and you can make a loose connection between the two of them, boom, folks, that's impeachment. So Lindsey Graham is laying the groundwork for Senator Schumer's impeachment. The Trump presidency is over in 3 days. The vice president of the U.S. withstood immense, unprecedented partisan pressure and fulfilled his oath to the Constitution of the U.S. You must now do the same. Senate should vote to dismiss the article of impeachment. Once it is received in the Senate, we will be delaying indefinitely, if not forever, the healing of this great nation if we do not do otherwise. Our obligation to the people we represent is clear. History will judge us harshly, as it should if we do not rise to the occasion of this historic moment in our history. Quick thing I wanted to note out here. When he's talking about this, he's saying the vice president withstood immense and unprecedented partisan pressure and fulfilled his oath to the Constitution. It doesn't sound like it serves Donald Trump particularly well. If Lindsay is now saying that the vice president faced immense and unprecedented partisan pressure, was that the pressure from the president? Because that's kind of the only place that the pressure would come from, right? It's not going to be coming from Congress or from the Democrats or from the GOP. It's coming from Trump. So if Lindsey Graham is trying to make his case to the Senate, in particular Chuck Schumer, that Donald Trump doesn't deserve to be impeached, by him sort of going around the back door and saying, we got to really applaud Vice President Pence for doing such a great job refusing to buckle to the pressure of the president. So you see how it's kind of going both ways. On the one hand, Lindsey Graham is saying this impeachment is unnecessary. It's just going to divide the nation. Donald Trump essentially doesn't deserve to be impeached for this stuff. Kind of doesn't say that, but he's just saying this is meaningless and it's not going to help the country. All right, so that's fine. But on the other hand, he's saying, yeah, we know he pressured the hell out of Vice President Mike Pence, and he withstood all of that pressure, which is kind of a damning thing to do, right? If you have somebody in a position of power who's placing immense and unprecedented partisan pressure on somebody, wouldn't you want that person to be removed from office and not able to run again? So he's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth just a little bit. We'll see where it goes. Rand Paul says, another senator, says that 1/3 of Republicans will leave the party if the GOP goes along with convicting Trump. And I think it's probably a lot bigger than that. It's probably 2/3 or 5/6. It's going to be a big number. And I'm not speaking for myself. I wouldn't consider myself to be a Republican. I think I'm registered Republican, but I am like so done with the Republican Party, it's not even funny. So Rand Paul is saying that there will be a mass exodus as if there has not already been a mass exodus. So here's what he says. He warned of a mass exodus from the Republican Party if they come together with the Democrats and convict Trump in a second impeachment trial. Even after he leaves office next week, Republican told Fox News host Laura Ingraham he believes 1/3 of the party will leave if this comes to fruition, stating he believes this is, quote, purely a partisan thing. I didn't agree with the fight that happened last week. I voted against overturning the election, but at the same time, the impeachment is a wrong-headed partisan notion. If Republicans go along with it, it will destroy the party. 1/3 of Republicans will leave the party, and I think it's dramatically higher than that number. I think many people have basically already left. I mean, who the Republicans are going to rally around now? It's going to be Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Rand Paul, or is it going to be Ben Sasse, Tom Cotton, Mitch McConnell? We'll see. If you are a Democrat, you're probably loving it. You're probably in total agreement with Karl Rove that there is a civil war in the Republican Party, and we're going to see where it shakes out. Well, tomorrow we've got Donald Trump, who should be issuing a lot of pardons. Here, this article came from Business Insiders and via Reuters. Trump reportedly plans to issue 100 pardons and commutations in his final day in office. President Trump announced plans to pardon or commute as many as 100 people in his final full day. List of names was drawn up by Trump on Sunday during a meeting with Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, and numerous other aides, according to the Washington Post. The decision is expected Monday or Tuesday, the Post reported. And I think there were some hints. Stuff was coming out today that it's looking like it's not going to be him. It's not going to be Trump. He's not going to do a self-pardon. He's not going to pardon anybody in his family, and it's going to be some people. There's no indication that he's going to be pardoning Snowden or Assange. I think Lil Wayne's on the list, so we'll see what ultimately happens with it. The identities of 100 people are not known. Some of the president's allies are said to believe that many of the pardons will go to people Trump expects to benefit from in the future. Expected to depart the White House on Wednesday, and go back down to Florida at Mar-a-Lago. He's considering reviving his TV career, building a $2 billion presidential library, launching a TV or social media network, running for president again in 2024. Inundated with requests for pardons. We've got one from the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley. We've got one from Tiger King star Joe Exotic. Some of Trump's allies appear to be benefiting, even if they aren't seeking pardons themselves. On Sunday, New York Times reported several people close to the president collected tens of thousands of dollars each in exchange for helping people seek pardons from Trump. And somebody told Rudy Giuliani, $2 million. Rudy denied any involvement in all of that. The identities are still not known. CNN reported Dr. Salman Melgen, an eye doctor from Florida who is in prison and has been found guilty of healthcare fraud. One of those, apparently one of those who has been granted clemency or will be. Bloomberg said Lil Wayne, Kodak Black are also on the list. We've got on December 22nd, Trump pardoned 20 people, including 2 Border Patrol agents, 4 former Blackwater guards. He pardoned GOP strategist Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner's father, former K-9 police officer, and so on. But it's looking like he's not going to be pardoning himself. This was over from Reuters. At this point, he's opting not to issue a pardon from himself as he prepares an expansive list, privately debated with advisors whether to take the extraordinary step of issuing a pardon for himself, but some officials have cautioned him it would make him look guilty. Many scholars said the self-pardon would be unconstitutional. It violates the basic principle that nobody should be the judge of his or her own case. And somebody speaking on condition of anonymity said that they don't think that it's going to happen for him or for his family members. So we will see where that goes. I expect them, they may be like coming out tonight or early tomorrow, midday tomorrow. We'll see what the list looks like. Every time this happens, it's not usually good names on the lists, right? So just brace yourselves for that. Every single time this happens, there's always people on there that everybody scratches their head. It happened when Obama did it, when Clinton did it, when Bush did it. It's just one of those things that kind of just feels a little bit like you need a shower after every one of them. And I'm saying that as a criminal defense attorney, right? Some of these people, I don't know how they get the pardons. I know a lot of people that are in the justice system currently that don't deserve to be there. And it sort of breaks my heart that there are so many people in there for such benign crimes, in my mind, that don't deserve a life of incarceration. And then you have some of these major heavy hitters who somehow get commutations and pardons that other people would not be entitled to get. Just kind of it's one of those days. It's sort of a bad feeling as a criminal defense attorney when you see these massive inequities going on in our justice system, and you just wonder, okay, pays to be somebody with power and money and influence, and we'll see who's on that list. Would love to see Edward Snowden. Would love to see Julian Assange on there. I know that a lot of people sort of disagree with that because of the potential ramifications that could come to our intelligence agencies. The idea here largely, and I think this is why Will Barr does not want these individuals to be pardoned, is if they are pardoned, then the allegation is that it will open up a floodgate of more leaks from within our intelligence community, right? If Edward Snowden can leak some documents to The Guardian, if Julian Assange can publish documents on WikiLeaks, then what's to stop other people from doing that? If they can get away with it, then why wouldn't anybody who's got a problem with what's happening in the intelligence agencies, why wouldn't they just leak it, knowing that it's okay? There's precedent now that this stuff can be useful, be public, and you can even get pardoned from it, right? Didn't Barack Obama, Chelsea Manning, I think he commuted her sentence as well. Did that happen when he commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence? Was there a floodgate in our intelligence community? I don't think so, but I don't know. We'll see what Donald Trump wants to do with it, and that should be here tomorrow, if not late tonight. Kind of surprised that document has not come out or been leaked already. We also, tomorrow's going to be an interesting day because there are more documents that are coming out in addition to Trump's pardon documents. Ghislaine Maxwell, records are going to be unsealed tomorrow. We pulled this document over from the Southern District of New York, the U.S. District Court. It's in this case of Virginia Giuffre against Ghislaine Maxwell. And it says, having considered the parties' proposals regarding the next set of docket entries to be reviewed for unsealing, the court will continue its current course of considering for unsealing the decided motions for Does 1 and 2. They'll next consider docket entries for these other documents, and then they're going to rule telephonically on the unsealing of materials on January 19th, 2021 at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So tomorrow there should be some more documents, or we'll at least get a ruling on whether they are going to ultimately unseal those documents tomorrow. And then the court will communicate separately to counsel for information. And there's the call-in line signed by Loretta Preska tomorrow. So we'll see what is new with Ghislaine's case. If the judge unseals those records, maybe some spicy meatball in there. But we're going to have to wait and see. Twitter also over this weekend was active with a clip here from CNN. CNN had this guy on who used to be with, his name's Alex Stamos. He is the director of the Stanford Internet Observatory. He used to be a bigwig over at Facebook. And he's talking about literally shutting down different media channels, places like One America News Network and Newsmax. And they're really concerned that, people are getting a little bit too much of a voice. He's saying that there are people here on YouTube that have a larger audience than daytime CNN, which we certainly don't. But what you understand the point. Well, they're competing with CNN, and so they're on CNN talking about how they can clamp down on some of their competition, as it were, because the competition is a little bit dangerous. Here he is on CNN making that case.
Now we're talking about domestic audience in the United States. And the challenge is going to be partially that, ISIS did not have a domestic constituency in the United States Congress. But there is over half of the Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the election. And there will be a continual political pressure on the companies to not take it seriously. So I think first you have to focus on those violent extremists, and those companies have to be brave in that way. And second, we have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN. And they are extremely radical and pushing extremely radical views. And so it's up to the Facebooks and YouTubes in particular to think about whether or not they want to be effectively cable networks for disinformation. And then we're going to have to figure out the OANN and Newsmax problem. That these companies have freedom of speech, but I'm not sure we need Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such to be bringing them into tens of millions of homes. This is allowing people to seek out information if they really want to, but not pushing it into their faces, I think is where we're going to have to go here.
You see Chris Krebs over there? Chris Krebs was a former CISA director. Remember, he gave a little bit of a testimony in front of I think it was a Judiciary Committee because Rand Paul was on there. I think that's what it was. And he's just over there just bouncing his head, just nodding away. Yeah, yep. We have a One America News Network and a Newsmax problem. And we have these other companies like Verizon. They're beaming this hate speech into other people's living rooms. And we got to do something about that. That's not okay. We also got to do something about these YouTubers because some of these YouTubers have bigger audiences than CNN does. Oh, we don't want that because they're just spewing a bunch of hate speech. So you can see here some of the language was put in quotes here. We have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN. Then he calls for One America News and Newsmax to be deplatformed. So the cascade of cancellations, just the domino, one into another. First they came for Parler, then they came for first they came for Twitter, then they came for Parler, then they went for Gab, then they went for Alex Jones. Now they're trying to deplatform everything and everybody, right? And you can't even certain companies have their payment processing canceled by Visa and Discover and so on. And now they're trying to, Twitter's not good enough. Parler's not good enough. We also got to get rid of One America News. Also got to get rid of the YouTubers because this stuff is dangerous. Here's some more language over from Oliver Darcy. He says also, we are going to have to figure out the One America News and Newsmax problems. These companies have freedom of speech, but I'm not sure we need Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such, bringing them into tens of millions of homes. Just a reminder that neither Verizon, AT&T, or Comcast have answered any questions about why they beam channels like One American News or Newsmax into millions of homes. Do they have any second thoughts about distributing these channels given their election denialism content? They won't say. So Oliver Darcy is just doubling down on that. Now they're going to be just any language, any communication, any media that goes against the standard narrative now has to be questioned. I mean, it could just be as simple as, hey, people like One American News. They don't trust your garbage news channel called CNN. So they want an alternative. And CNN is out there saying, whoa, that's dangerous because they're Trumpers. They're into election denialism. You see how this goes? Wasn't there like a climate change denialism? And there's just all these denialisms. Because if you think for yourself and you have questions about the standard narrative, you are dangerous now. You are somebody who is potentially a threat to the president. I mean, if you're a National Guard person and you voted for Trump, whoa, we better have you checked out by the FBI to make sure you're not a radical just because you express your political philosophy in the United States of America. It's wild, folks. I don't even know what to say about it. We've got James O'Keefe had another statement that was released, another expose from Twitter just today, posted this afternoon. And once again, we just sort of see the inside, the back, behind the curtain on what's going on over at Twitter.
Beyond de-amplification, we are going to, conspiracy theories, we are going to be permanently suspending those accounts. Whether we believe Trump's tweets are inciting violence and having real world harm, I think we've seen that, in fact, they are, since coming back from the timeout to de-escalate the situation in other places around the world where we've seen violence unfold as a result of either misleading information or coded rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
A lot of our learnings here have come from other markets. So in that sense, we do feel like this is our global approach. We need to be very focused on being able to enforce any of these policies or enforcement decisions we make at scale. I think long term we want to be in terms of building trust and enforcing policies consistently and providing adequate notice before we take a very aggressive step like a permanent suspension. There's also been a lot of questions about retros, of course we're going to do a retro. I mean, we're in the midst of a retro around the election generally. This will be most definitely folded into it. What we saw Wednesday morning was really concerning to us, obviously. So a small team gathered from Trust and Safety. We were discussing the potential for violence to happen, and we decided to escalate our enforcement of the civic integrity policy and use a label that disabled engagements to stop the spread of potentially inflammatory content, which is the content around election interference, election fraud, stealing the election, that type of thing. We are going to, conspiracy theories, we are going to...
Yeah, so, my initial thought on this was sort of a bunch of, C-level technobabble from Twitter, right? They're talking a lot about, well, we've got the civic policy and this policy and that policy, and we're going to do this and threats and all that stuff. It's all just nonsense as far as I can tell, because we read their actual statement when they suspended Donald Trump. We read it. We went through the language, and we did it on this channel directly from the primary source, Twitter. And what they had said in there is that you can basically use language to connect the dots with anything. I mean, you can use language to do anything in the world. You can find guilty people innocent. You can find innocent people guilty in a court of law just with using language. And you can be very provocative. You can be very compelling, persuasive. I mean, there's a lot you can do with it. And so what she said there sounded nice, and it sounded fluffy and sort of fluttery and like, oh, we've got a policy and we've got some formats and some procedures and things. But it was essentially meaningless, because what they did is they found a conclusion that they wanted to have happen, and they worked backwards in order to make that work. So the conclusion here, they wanted Donald Trump off of Twitter. How did they do that? They just reverse engineered the aftermath of the Capitol Hill riots in a way that they could sort of connect the dots back to a removal. And the way they did that in their public policy, their statement that they put out that coincided with Trump being removed from Twitter, banned, suspended, was this idea here that because he's not going to be going to the inauguration, that was sort of code word for him wanting to see more violence. You remember that? It said, well, he's not going there, which means That's probably a code word to tell those other white supremacist Nazi insurrectionists that I'm not going to be there. Therefore, you can go, I don't know, nuke the Capitol building again or do something when the inauguration is taking place. And you just go, he didn't say that. He actually put out a video shortly thereafter, said, no violence, no violence, no violence, go home. Right. And they just picked up something and they connected it through their little, manipulations into ultimately removing Trump from Twitter. So you can just come up with whatever you want. And, now they're trying to sort of connect all this stuff back to policies. And, that, it sounds like they thought a lot about it. But this, in my mind, was just entirely coordinated and orchestrated. Trump went down, Facebook went down, Parler went down, Amazon took them off, just across the board. I mean, Trump was suspended off of everything, right? I saw a graphic on CNN, Spotify and Pinterest. And is Donald Trump on Pinterest picking out pictures for his hotels and stuff like that? I mean, what the hell are they doing? So he's just gone from everything. And now they're sort of, backpedaling a little bit and trying to connect this all to, we're just trying to stop the incitement of violence, but everything that they have done, in my mind, has gone against, they have sort of removed the tools from Trump's toolbox to help quell more violence. He's had a number of different public statements since he's been banned that he cannot communicate well to his followers. He's got 88 million followers or had 88 million followers. Would have been very nice if he could have just communicated to them and said, hey, once again, I disavow violence. This is not who we stand for. This is not the America I want. This is not the movement, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't do that. So now what he's been sort of diminished to is just releasing press release briefings that are then sort of scattered out throughout the internet. So, Twitter, I think their stocks are down again today. Hate to see it, don't you? Let's jump into the super chats. We got one from Seiji Takahari. Says, people will pay exorbitant amounts for gold, and yet they refuse to recognize any value in the ore it comes from, nor the processing that goes into it. Were we talking about gold today? Thanks, Saji. He said, Wolfgang says, would be funny, suspend habeas corpus, sign Insurrection Act on the Dems, play Uno, reverse card, and leave with no president, walk away, hashtag mic drop. Good to see you, Wolfgang. Thanks for being here. We have another one from Sista. Who did you vote for? Well, I didn't vote for Biden. I'll tell you that much. Good to have you here. We have Chris Wolney. Lack of mainstream media coverage at the Capitol on 1/6. Big tech selectively controlling video posts of protesters. Info blackout plan to control the narratives. Yeah, lack of mainstream media coverage on the Capitol on 1/6. Video posts of protesters. Info blackout plan to control the narratives. I wouldn't be surprised at all by that. Everything else is locked down. So if you just think that they're just going to barricade a bunch of bridges, prevent you from crossing in there, prevent you from, traveling the streets. You can't get an Uber. You can't do anything like that. And they're going to implement that level of security, and they're not going to have some sort of reign or some sort of controls on what is happening online, I think is very naive. I don't have any evidence for it, right? There's no documents to support that, that they have this big sort of net around online activity. But you just gotta presume that they do, right? We've seen everything that's been leaked out from WikiLeaks. We've seen everything that Snowden had to say. We've seen big tech just be in total collusion with the government. I mean, they go hand in hand. They built in back doors for the NSA and everything. And so if you're sitting in a situation now where everything else around the Capitol is on lockdown, do they know something that we don't know? Is this a show of force? Are they just sort of live action role playing, LARPing, where they're just trying to say, see, we told you so, you wacko Trumps, like, look what you made us do. It's like when your mom, does something and she says, look what you made me do. You were so wrong that I had to do this. And then you feel terrible. You're like, well, man, I am a kind of a terrible person. And sort of, now like the Trump people are like, well, I guess we're all kind of losers. Look what they have to do in order to secure the Capitol. So are they just going to not control what's going on the internet? I mean, they're already controlling what's on the internet. They're already banning entire platforms. Good to see you, Chris. Beth Coddington. Hi, Robert and friends. Caravan of migrants are heading towards the U.S. already turned away. Biden's first promise broken. A trend, perhaps? Yeah, probably. I think Biden isn't one of his things on day one to start a process of amnesty, I think, is going on. I don't know. I saw a lot of those caravans moving on up. We'll see what happens when they get here. Good to see you there, Beth. We have Paula, MK85. CNN says Newsmax and OAN have free speech, but that AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast should not allow them on their service. Where will this end? Well, I think what we're seeing here is just a consolidation of power, and they're using the Capitol Hill protests and riots as an excuse to do so. So here what we have is, think about when I was growing up, we had cable, and with cable, you got a bundle of channels, and that's it. That's all you had, right? When I was a boy, we had a 56K modem. Before that, I had a 14.4 baud modem, and you would log into AOL, and you'd go to your instant messenger and your chat, and that was kind of your internet at that time. And CNN was one of the big news companies, right? CNN was around. I don't even know what the other ones were. It was CNN and C-SPAN, and there's a handful of them. And as the internet boomed, their power slowly started to slip away. You had competitors come up in the form of Fox News. Still a further slow slipping away of their power, their media control. And now today, there's all sorts of other competition, all sorts of platforms. Now you can just be One America News. I don't even know where they were 5 years ago. Boom, here they are. It's a new platform. They're competing with Fox News. Same with Newsmax, right? They were sort of a blip in the radar until Fox News did something and everybody left Fox News and went over to these other platforms. Now you can just start a YouTube channel like that guy was just complaining about. And you can just instantly broadcast to people, and you can do so in a way that's more responsive, that people prefer to watching the 2-minute sound bites that they get from Brian Stelter on CNN. That's a threat to them. They don't like that. So now what they have to do is find some justification for them to stop this diversification of opinion and platform and consolidate them back under one house. And they're doing it here under the guise of denialism. Election denialism is what they're calling it. They're going to use the same thing as sort of insurrectionists, seditionists. Right? Everybody who is not in alignment with their ideology is now on the fringe, and the only alternative is to shut them up, shut them out, so that they can bring everything back in under their roof where it's nice and safe and they have control. Coincidentally, they make a lot of money. They make a lot of profit if they can just get rid of their competitors. If CNN doesn't have OAN and Newsmax, and they can even get rid of Fox News, let's say, what else are you going to watch? You got to tune to CNN. They'll sell a lot more ads. Lava Java Lava says, I was under the impression that all military votes were for Joe Biden. What seems to be the problem? Yeah, that's a good one, Lava. Yeah, right? I mean, basically everybody in the country voted for Biden, allegedly. The most popular president. We have Chris Wolney says, security screens can be abused. Trust judiciously. Yeah, I would imagine that, right? Look, certainly it's hard for me to come down on sort of the militarization of DC because I don't want anything to happen. I don't want anything at all to happen. But I don't know why you have a bunch of troops out there without any ammunition, right? What are they doing there then? Is it just a show? What are we doing? I don't know. Good to see you, Chris. Wolfgang Deo says, I remember those things quite well and kept it in mind. However, I ended up worried about my command, and they the same with me. Thankfully, I left. We have another one from Chris. There is no due process in security clearances. Yeah, I would imagine that, right? And like I said, I've never been a part of the military, so I just don't know. I would guess that when you enlist, you sort of give up certain rights and freedoms, right? You're part of the military now. And so, if they want to know how you voted, I would guess that you got to tell them, or you have to agree to subject yourself to further inquiry. I can't imagine that you get into the military and you're just like, nope, that's it. I'm not answering those questions anymore. And they just say, oh, all right, that's fine. You're right. You have a right to free speech and a right to free expression. And yeah, okay, here you go. Go back out there. I can't imagine that they allow that to happen. Beth Coddington says a teacher was fired for posting a meme on her Facebook pic of a potato chip. If this chip ran against Biden, I would vote for the chip. A teacher was fired for that? Yeah, I mean, everybody's getting canceled here. Everybody's getting banned and canceled. I hope she finds a different job. John McLean says, you bet the military if you are building the Third Reich. And a lot of those comments as well. I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of that sort of feeling here, right? If Joe Biden is the most popular president, he's somebody who won by 7 million votes. Everybody loves the guy, and he's just going to sort of ride into power on these wings of angels and save America. Then why do you need 25,000 troops to keep you safe? I think Mike Cernovich posted this on Twitter, and he said it's kind of like exactly what it would look like if there was a coup. You'd have the military there installing the next leader in, right? And is that how you have a transfer of power in a civilian society? Now, the response to that is, well, this is all Donald Trump's fault. This is all Trump's fault. He was the one who was bringing in all of these people, causing a lot of bluster around the last election, and he's the one responsible for cultivating this sense of impending doom and this idea that the country is being stolen out from under us. So he's the one responsible for all of this militarization. He's the one who made this necessary. Shame on Trump, shame on his supporters, and shame on anybody who even sympathizes with him at all. And on the other side, people are going, all right, so you need 25,000 troops for what now? Got it. And then when they come in, you're going to be vetting them all, investigating all of them because you don't even trust your own military. Okay. So it's a good way to start a presidency. It's going to be one of the most bizarre inaugurations I think we'll probably ever see. Another one from Chris Wolney. Chansley is the bullhorn guy. His story is curious. Yeah, you're right, Chris. It is curious. I think we saw him at a BLM protest here in Arizona. There was a story about that. And so he seems to me like just kind of one of these professional agitators. I also saw him, there was a video that was sort of floating around on the internet this weekend where he was walking into the Senate chambers, and there was a cop just kind of following him through and just saying, hey, can you guys just please leave? Like, this is the most sacred room in the building. Can you please just get out of here? Some other guy was like sort of laying on the floor, got shot in the face with rubber bullets, even though I thought that there was like no rubber bullets that were shot because it was the white supremacist cops trying to disavow the white supremacist rioters. And, apparently they were in collusion, even though the cops were shooting tear gas and rubber bullets in these guys' faces. Apparently it was all just, a bunch of white supremacists. So it was a seditious coup that was not really a seditious coup. It was sort of like a bunch of knuckleheads running through a government building rioting. Weird stuff. JB says, as you spoke, I found the words, isn't who is aligned, it's who is on my team and won't get in my way. I know, too easy to assume, too cliche, but place your bets because Trump was the first part of this double feature called Kabuki Theater. Thank you, JB, for that. Thanks for the nice super chat. Trump was the first part of this double feature called Kabuki Theater. Yeah, it's my words are not with me today, folks. We have Jeff Doe says, why would you need all this security unless you know you stole the election? It does feel kind of weird. But if you say that, then who's gonna ultimately steal back the election? It's just they're just kind of there. Like, what's the purpose of the military? Is the military there to stop the rabid Trump supporters? Because they were supposed to show up on Sunday and they didn't. Are they going to show up on Wednesday? And that's what they're prepared for? If so, then why are they standing there with no guns or with guns with no magazines? And if you're really concerned about those rabid Trump supporters, why would you bring in the National Guard, as the CNN guy was talking about, where 80% of the people voted for Trump and don't want you in anyway? So you have to vet them. It just doesn't make much sense. It's just weird. Kind of just feels like a show. That's kind of the only explanation I think that makes sense. Kenneth Fielder, hey, here is a question. Why would you need those troops if true that 81 million people voted for Biden? We know the pro-Trump protests leading up to the 6th were peaceful. Antifa, BLM were destructive every time. It's a good observation there, Kenneth. I don't know the answer to it. We have another one from Sniper Jared. Says, nothing like purging the military of dissenters before your totally legit inauguration, defended by more troops than all of our active war zones. Yeah. What the heck is that? Is that accurate? It's more troops than in all of our active war zones? It's 25,000 troops. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And if you were, if you wanted to sort of cleanse the military of anybody who was oppositional to you, is that not problematic? Yes, I understand checking to make sure that they're sane and rational, but I mean, hasn't that already been done? Why are you double and triple checking these guys? Weird stuff. The only NG troops who will get live ammo for the rifles will be those who voted for Biden. Been through this before 40 years ago in a country far, far beyond American shores. That comes from TBR DFH 51. Been through this 40 years ago in a country far beyond the American shores. It feels to me like like I said, I've not been in the military, but I would be pretty upset about that. You know, if I swore an oath to defend this Constitution, to defend America, to follow the commander in chief, and they said, well, because you voted for the other guy, you don't get a magazine, and we're going to put you way back there, away from anything important, because you expressed your political ideology. It feels insulting to me, but what do I know? Cracklin. How is there not sufficient evidence for a hearing on fraud, but there is enough evidence to impeach the president? It all sounds very subjective and in one political direction. Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Cracklin. You know, this is something where I'm in total agreement with you. I think that the impeachment debacle is purely political. We went through the article that was drafted in the House of Representatives and that was ultimately voted on. Basically no evidence there. They used two sentences from Trump's speech that he gave at the Save America rally, and they were mostly benign. I mean, the one that they were concerned about was a sentence where he said you have to fight for your country, or you're not going to fight like hell, or you're not going to have a country anymore. And they said that was incitement, even though it looks like the Capitol was being breached before he uttered that sentence. So now they have to expand the scope and include everything that he's ever said in order to make a case. So they lumped in the Raffensperger phone call and a bunch of, not even a bunch of other things, just a phone call. And I thought it was a very low standard, did not satisfy me as somebody who likes to see evidence before somebody is penalized. I like to see the charges. In criminal law, we have mountains of documents, evidence, police reports, investigators, detectives, multiple cops, prosecutors reviewing the case, swearing oaths, probable cause statements, all this stuff. None of that happened. It was just a 4-page document that was an article of impeachment with very little evidence. Totally political, which is why I'm inviting you to draft your own article of impeachment. Join the impeachment party, where we're going to impeach everybody and get our country back. How does that sound? We have another one from Liberty or Death. Says, apart from being in law school in Atlanta, where I've been physically threatened by class for wearing a Trump hat, I'm retired Army. DC is troubling. Thank you for that, Liberty or Death. Yeah, so physically threatened by class for wearing a Trump hat. Law school is, at least in my experience, most lawyers are very liberal. In my experience, they just tend to be very liberal. And I don't know why that is. I think because a lot of law school professors are also liberal, and a lot of higher education is just liberal in general. And it doesn't surprise me at all that you would get harassed for wearing a Trump hat. Not even a little bit. He's retired Army. He says DC is troubling. It's troubling to me. I'm sure you know more than I do. You have a better sense of why it is so troubling, but feels troubling to me. And I think a lot of people are observing it, but it's been funny because nobody's really coming to a conclusion. The best sort of, it's all just sort of analysis. Everybody's just observing what's happening. I follow a guy named Jack Murphy on Twitter. He seems to be ex-military, and he had this big long thread about it. And also he was just observing. It's sort of like the COVID lockdown thing. Remember when there was national security and everybody was locked down, and it just kind of felt surreal. Like we all knew something was wrong, but we couldn't really pinpoint it. It just doesn't feel right. The energy of the world feels off, and everybody's sort of waiting for something to happen. So it kind of feels like that in DC, and I don't like it. I hope nothing happens, because it's troubling. Isaac Castillo says, regarding dismissed election lawsuits across the country, what is the recourse when Trump lawyers could not bring suits until harm was done, and when harm occurred, latches prevent the suit from going forward? Good to see you, Isaac. The recourse is an appeal. And they appealed a number of cases. Some of them they have not appealed, and I think even more of them are now just sort of being withdrawn. I think there were a number of lawsuits that we were covering out of Georgia. A lot of the lawsuits that we were sort of monitoring are all just being dismissed or declared as moot. And Trump has, at least in my understanding, is not appealing these things anymore and is actually withdrawing them and no longer defending them because he's recognizing that they're also moot. So the only recourse would be to appeal these things up the chain. So you'd go from a federal district court to a circuit court up to the Supreme Court. And time and again, many of those have been dumped, dismissed, and just considered to be invalid by the courts. So once you hit that point, there is no more recourse. It just is what it is. You have to have a political momentum. So, a big thing that I've been talking about here is to go and talk about electoral reform locally with your local state representatives, state senators, in a way that will help fix things locally. And then once that spreads across the state, maybe, that can bubble up on the federal level. But yeah, Trump's lawsuits are basically done and over with. So I don't even know that there's much point in following them. Now, unless there are some other lawsuits, Isaac, where in Arizona, I think in Kelly Ward's lawsuit, she's still moving forward with those lawsuits because she's got a different purpose. This is not a Trump lawsuit. So there are other lawsuits that are taking place where they're just trying to still uncover election irregularity, which is what's taking place in Arizona. So we'll see where some of those end up, whether they result in any reform or any changes or any substantive rulings. We'll have to wait and see. Lava Java Lava says, does impeachment of the president remove access to classified intelligence? I was under the impression that they still hold a security clearance. So I think, I don't know the answer to that question, Lava. I don't see anything in the Constitution about that. I would imagine that they would. And I think the reason being is unless there's some sort of determination by an intelligence agency that person is not safe or not privy to that data, which honestly would not surprise me at all. But I think that one of the rationales for keeping former presidents in the loop is because they were in the loop for 4 years. And there are probably a lot of ongoing intelligence activities that the president was involved in that are just not over because he's no longer in office, right? Donald Trump, the projects that Donald Trump was working on don't end on January 20th. Joe Biden's going to come in and try to undo a lot of them by fiat, via executive order and so on, sort of reverse everything that he can. But there's a lot of stuff that I think is in the intelligence apparatus that he was a part of, Trump was a part of, and he will continue to need to be sort of in the loop about that, because if something happens, they may need to question him. His input might be valuable, and he can only have valuable input if he is informed about what is actually going on. We have another one from Crispy Leg Transport. Sounds like Karl Rove wanted to get a GOP talking point out. Why did he say that? Karl Rove is very, very mainstream Republican, so I'm not sure, what his tactic is here, whether or not he wants to see Trump impeached or not. But I think he has a point about Rudy and Rudy's alleged direction that he was going in for impeachment defense, which is to basically say, sorry, you deserved it because you didn't get enough of a hearing on some of these election integrity issues, I think is problematic regardless. So, many people may not like Karl Rove. I think he's a pretty sharp guy, pretty astute observer, but he's not a Trump fan, right? I think he was a never Trumper across the board, probably will continue to be. Somebody's a very mainstream establishment, cocktail party Republican. And so you got to take it for what it's worth. Toots Magooth said, I served in the National Guard for 12 years. I was part of a TF that provided security for Obama's first inauguration. The FBI vetting the NGs goes against the standard operating procedures. All right. So why are they doing it then? I don't know. Toots Magooth says, we trained for a year. They equipped us with road guard vests and we directed traffic. This seems like a divisive tactic and not about safety. Well, there you have it, folks. We're learning some stuff today. Isaac Castillo says, finding healing rhetoric facetious. Feels like a bad relationship and one party has to have the last word while saying we need to heal. Major gaslighting. I could not possibly agree with you more on that, Isaac. I think it's 100% accurate. And you're seeing sort of, look, I know I'm going to be probably thought to be a sort of a sore loser here when I say this, but it feels to me like it's almost like gloating in a certain sense. Like they're like, okay, we have power now. We're just going to impeach him. Why? Well, just because we just want to, and we can, and we're just going to do it. And you can like it or not. Doesn't matter because we're going to do it anyways. And, they're just moving forward with that regardless of what the ultimate remedy is. Like, it doesn't, is Trump going to run for office again? I have no idea. I doubt it. I don't think that the Republicans in general want to go through that again. So, even if he did, I don't know if he has the ability to win it, but, who knows? And he's going to be removed from office anyways. And so it just feels spiteful and kind of vindictive. And if, they're entitled to do it. I have no, if they want to do it, they're entitled to do it. I think their standard was very low and very subpar. And I think it's sort of just a political show trial, but they're entitled to do it. And if the Republicans had any stones, they would turn right around and do the same thing. They'd say, okay, all right, this is your standard. Listen, I already drafted the article for them. If they want to use my document, no problem. They can file one against Nancy, against Chuck, against Kamala. Easy. Kamala's already done. I did it. They could also do one against Biden. I mean, they can impeach everybody for everything using the Democrats' own standard. But the Republicans, they don't have any stones. They like to go along and get along. They want to go back to the cocktail parties. Trump didn't invite him to the cocktail parties. But now that the Democrats are in charge, they can go back to the cocktail parties and they can have a lot of fun and life will be good again. So they don't necessarily care, I think, about doing any ultimate good for the American people. So the healing talk, the talk of like, let's unify and move past this stuff, the actions don't match the words. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing there, Isaac. We have Rhonda McMichael. Census report will not come out until after the 20th. The director of the U.S. Census Bureau resigned today. What gives? I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of this type of stuff, I think, right now. You're going to see a flurry of activity. So on the 20th, I'll be looking for one thing in particular. I want to see what the volume of activity looks like. How much stuff do they cram in, let's say, the first week? Because you're going to want to be trying to identify, there's going to be some spicy stuff in there that sort of draws everybody's attention. And you go, oh, gosh, what about this? What about this? What about this? Really inflammatory, highly controversial things. Like the story we're hearing about today is the Keystone Pipeline, right? Everybody's up in arms about the Keystone Pipeline. Okay, but what else, right? What are some of these other things that are sort of slid in under the radar? There's going to be a big flurry of activity, but I'm more curious about some of the less, let's say, provocative stuff, the stuff that just gets done that nobody really talks about. I'm going to be curious to see what is in that. And the Census Bureau, reapportionment as a result of the Census Bureau. Where are people moving from? Where are they going? How many people are here? It's important because it dictates the future of the political landscape, right? You might have representatives change. You might have electoral votes change. So it's a pretty big deal. That's why they fought so hard about it, whether to include undocumented immigrants or not. I think that went up to the Supreme Court. Lava Java Lava says, I asked this on Friday. Do you believe that some Republicans will be facing sedition charges for not accepting Biden's presidency? I don't think so. I actually don't think so. I don't think that is going to go that far. I think that right now you're seeing a lot of activity about it. And so this is the big ask, right? So when you go into a negotiation and you want to have a big opening offer, right? Go into a prosecutor's office. You say, I want all my charges dismissed, and I want a letter from the officer apologizing to my client. How about that? And the prosecutor just laughs at you, right? And they say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to give your client 200 years in jail. And then you say, all right, well, that's insane. Like, we're not going to do that either, right? So both people come in with a big ask, and then you resolve something in the middle. All right, well, I mean, we can live with that. Can you live with that? Sure, that's fine. And so here, all of these calls for sedition, all of these calls, for sedition charges, treason charges, throwing them out of Congress, throwing them out of the Senate, I think is largely just to rattle them a little bit. I'm not sure that that's actually going to happen. If it did, it'd be wild, right? Because I think the standard would be so low that you could just do it again. As soon as you get a good Republican Congress that has any stones, they would just turn around and do the same thing. And I think both sides know that. I think they're both probably cognizant of that. And so they want to be aggressive, but not too aggressive, because they know that the pendulum swings the other way. And if they're too aggressive, it can come back and bite them in the butt down the road. So here, I think what's ultimately happening is they're just trying to sort of shock and awe everybody to say, look, we have this. It's a big opening offer. We're prepared to move forward on that unless you moderate a little bit, right? Moderate yourself. Stop using this language. It's sort of a chilling effect on how business is done throughout the Hill. And it's happening across America as well. You're seeing it. People on Twitter, people on YouTube, everybody's sort of on red alert. Are we going to get canceled? Are we going to get banned? Are they going to shut this down, shut you down, shut all this stuff down? It's a chilling effect. So I'm not real sure that we're going to see ultimately sedition charges, but the goal is being accomplished nonetheless. We have another one from Isaac. Robert, we should have a pardon party. Go over the reason why they need a pardon in the first place, since you're a defense lawyer. Invaluable. So we'll see who's on the list. If there are some interesting people on there, it will be fun to make an argument. I'm sure I can come up with a Little Wayne argument. He had like a gun, I think, on a private plane. He's a prohibited possessor. If Trump pardons Little Wayne and not Edward Snowden, I'm going to be disappointed. We have Jack Bauer in the house, my favorite. Jack Bauer says, irony of history, that the leftists benefit medially from big tech turbo capitalism, and the conservatives urgently need state-regulated public broadcasting. Greets from Austria. Yeah, it is sort of a topsy-turvy kind of a world. I remember like 15 years ago. Was it 15 years ago? Gosh, I was cleaning pools. When I was in college, I was cleaning swimming pools. Before I went to law school, I used to clean pools and then construct pools. And I was listening a lot to Sean Hannity back then, which I don't listen to at all anymore. But I would listen to AM radio because I was outside all day and I was listening to talk radio. And I was listening to him, and I remember it was this huge thing because they were talking about the fairness doctrine, right? They were gonna sort of censor Rush Limbaugh, censor Sean Hannity. Michael Savage was also big back then, and it was this big concept that, no, these are private companies. These are private broadcasters. And Sean Hannity and all of them were just up in arms over this. The fairness doctrine is going to kill our freedom of speech and all of that stuff. And now it's like the conservatives are sort of going, oh, yeah, we could use some of that freedom of speech, because back 15 years ago, these big tech companies didn't have a lot of the influence and a lot of the power that they have. And talk radio was the big enemy. So they were coming after talk radio. Now the conservatives are sort of going after big tech. And it's just this never ending struggle over free speech and free expression. And it'll be curious to see how this stuff shakes out. Good to see you there, Jack Bauer, and good to see you from Austria. Thanks for joining us. We have George Katsanakis says, Trump still my president, martial law, four more years. So I'm hopeful that we don't have martial law. I don't think that's going to happen. Good to see you, George. We have another one from Sammy Elliott. What's your opinion for 2022 in the GOP? Should there be more of a populist GOP rather than the typical Mitt Romney GOPs? Yeah, I like the idea of more populism. I like the idea of more, I would say, kind of libertarian-ish bend towards things. I think that a good recipe would be sort of right on fiscal issues, sort of right of that, and then maybe a little bit more left on some of the social issues. I know that's sort of opposite of what a lot of people think, that politics is downstream of culture. You have to have a very strong culture in order to have a good political ends. I'm just not sure how attractive or how compelling that is. I think, in my age, my demographic, I don't particularly care much about what people do in their bedrooms or who goes into what bathrooms or any of that social stuff. I just don't. It doesn't impact me. Truly, it's one of those things. If somebody wants to be called something or go somewhere or do those things, I have no problems with that at all. Not at all. It's fine. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't impact my life. I'm happy to support more equality for those individuals. Whatever makes them happy, as long as it's not impeding on me or my life. Have fun, right? Go wild. The things that do impact my life are regulations and high taxes. And endless spending and spending for Lord knows what, right? And all of that does impact me every day. Impacts my business, impacts my family, impacts my ability to contribute to the world. If I'm getting hosed in taxes, I can't hire employees. I can't go grow our company. I can't go help more people, which is ultimately what I want to do. I think I know how to manage our business better than the government does. I would like more freedom to participate in the economy. I think that there should be less regulations. I think COVID was something that was an overbroad solution to a problem that could have benefited from a more focused solution. And so if on the right, we're just saying less regulations, less taxes, more economic freedoms, some of the traditional civic virtues that I think made this country great, that are embodied in the Bill of Rights, if we can get back to those, some of the social issues, it's fine. So I say, fiscally right, socially left. I think that would be more of a winning formula for the GOP in the future, but I don't know. And I certainly don't think, Mitt Romney had his shot, okay, multiple times. We had Mitch McConnell, who's been around for 100 years. We have Lindsey Graham, who is, part of the mainstream, just generic Republicans. Guys like Rand Paul, I'm curious about Rand Paul, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I think the Republican Party has a lot of soul searching to do. They're going to be out in the wilderness kind of finding themselves for some time. And when they come up with something, we'll see how attractive it is. The Wandering Mariner. Rob, exactly after you said the words Civil War, the video glitched. Please make a no violent statement. Don't want you taking down. Thank you, The Wandering Mariner. I disavow all violence. I've disavowed violence for as long as I've been on this channel. Never, not once, never have I encouraged people to go out and be violent. Not even close to that, right? I said it's not productive. It's not useful. It's dangerous. It does more harm than good, does not advance a cause. I disavow violence unequivocally. Thank you, The Wandering Mariner. Thank you, YouTube. We have another one from Manuel Choi. Trump doesn't have a platform to communicate. What about the White House YouTube and the press conference room that he has national and international reach? So it's a good question, Manuel. When he goes into the press conference room, where does that get broadcast? If the main news medias are not covering him, and they're not, CNN, Washington Post, if you go on there, they don't publish any of that stuff. I took screenshots. Donald Trump issued a statement last week that was nowhere to be found. And it was a very peaceful statement. I took screenshots of it, of CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, all of them. Nowhere. So if he's in a press conference room and he's talking, but nobody's broadcasting it, does he have international reach? Does he have national reach? And also YouTube, they gave him a strike on his channel. So he couldn't even upload anything for 7 days. And I'm going to guess after the inauguration, they're probably going to delete that too. So he is the president, but he has a less and less ability to communicate with individuals throughout the country and throughout the world. C-Sta says, you're officially my favorite lawyer. Thank you, C-Sta. I appreciate that. You're my favorite C-Sta. Thanks for being here. Kenneth Slayer says, in the UCMJ, I think that's the Uniform Code for Military Justice, there's an equal to all Bill of Rights. The Fifth Amendment is the UCMJ Article 31, but you cannot use constitutional rights as a soldier. Kenneth Slayer, thanks for that information. We have another one from Wolfgang. Military does have due process in a way. The focus is national security rather than your security. Problem is when everything is subverted. We have another one. Thanks, Wolfgang. Another one from Chris Wolney. Did you look at the Doug P. Horn YouTube regarding JFK? I have not, Chris. No, I have not. It's literally in my list, though. So I have a bunch of stuff that I'm just going to kind of watch through. And it's funny. I left here on Friday, and I had that written down here, and I came back here on Monday, and I looked at it. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So I will look into it. I want to see if Trump declassifies it, right? What if tomorrow just Trump declassifies everything? Fingers crossed there, Chris. Fingers crossed. We just got one more day. Jas Jones, have you covered the recent Georgia vid audio leak? GA, it must be Georgia. No, we haven't. So, Jassy Jones, have you covered the recent GA vid or audio leak? No, I have not. If that's from Georgia, then no, I haven't covered it. If it has to do with the election stuff, I probably won't cover it, right? I've said that for a while now. That I think on January 6th, January 7th, technically, when Joe Biden was officially read into the congressional journals, that was basically it. That's the end of the game. People were sending me Italy stuff, people were sending me General McKierney stuff, and so on, and it might be interesting, but it's no longer part of the legal process. It's irrelevant right now. If all this stuff came to light, it doesn't change anything. The only thing that it would change is people would be angry that Joe Biden's in office. He could either resign or get impeached, and then Kamala Harris would be president. That's about it. So I haven't spent much time on it, quite frankly. We have George Katsanakis says, somehow Trump will still be president. No clue how. Yeah, I think this is interesting, right? It's kind of a weird phenomenon. I'm still seeing people on Twitter saying, just wait, it's coming on the 20th. It's just around the corner. Trump didn't say transfer of power. He said transition of power. And you're going, come on, come on. Like it's done. Game's over. Time to pick the balls up and go home. We have Dave Murray says, of course, they did not arrest anyone in the riots during the summer and autumn, but get pretty much all law and order on the back of one riot. Now, well, one, yeah, you're right, Dave. One is useful. One is, well, actually, they're both useful. They're both useful in their own way. One is useful because it's showing that it's sort of I think, stirring up some long-lasting racial animosity, culture warfare, class warfare. All of that stuff is generally very, very good for Democrats. Right? It just sort of galvanizes people to vote. It creates good momentum, generates a lot of money. Kamala Harris was raising money on her Twitter platform to help people get out of jail, out of custody after they burnt down a lot of buildings over there in Minneapolis. And so, you can rally a lot of support around those issues. And they just let those things throughout the summer just sort of smolder around in various cities throughout the country. That was useful. This one, the Capitol Hill riots, it's also very useful for them by demonizing it, by saying everybody who's involved is terrible. They should be canceled. They shouldn't get jobs anymore. We should revoke all their degrees. We should cancel all their web platforms. We should silence them because they're dangerous. We should cancel. We know that there are competitors like OAN and Newsmax and Right Side Broadcasting and all of these conservatives. We know they're competitors, but that's not why we want to excommunicate them. We just want to do so because they're dangerous for democracy. They're harmful. They're election denialists and so on. We know it's going to help our business, but we really care about America. So one's useful, one's not. Pretty standard game here. Manuel Choi says, I can agree it is not Trump's fault. It's Rudy, Sidney Powell, Linwood. Why not make them accountable? Well, they might be held accountable there, Manuel. You've got Linwood. I don't know what happened to that guy. I think he's off Twitter now. He's off Parler. Probably just swimming in a sea of money that he grifted off a lot of people who fell for his stuff. And probably living a pretty okay life. He caused a lot of damage to the GOP, didn't he? He said, don't vote in the Senate races over in Georgia. Republicans lost both Senate races. He sort of tarnished the Trump people by getting out there and sort of grifting off of the MAGA movement and saying a lot of crazy things. And then he reversed course, or he sort of went off the wagon completely, just went bananas, saying terrible things about what should happen to Mike Pence and so forth, not even worth repeating. So he caused a lot of damage pretty quickly. Sidney Powell's being sued for $1.3 billion. So she may be held very accountable. We'll see. Not sure she has $1.3 billion. Not sure they were able to grift that much money off of the Trump supporters, but who knows? Sabo Abbas says, so Robert, please speculate. Where is the government, media, big tech censorship headed in the next 5 years? Have we in the USA completely lost our free speech? I don't think so, Sabo. I think, I'm not as fatalistic about this free speech stuff. I think that this is probably, an argument that has been going on in this country for a long period of time. And I think that free speech will prevail regardless of what big tech does. It's just a little bit behind right now, right? They set up these mega companies and mega structures that have a network effect where everybody's plugged in to these big tech companies. But you're seeing right now, I think in real time, sort of a diversification. You see a lot of conservatives, a lot of people are looking for alternative platforms, alternative media. There's always going to be a space for people to speak freely. And there's always going to be a group of people who are essentially, speech authoritarians. They want you to not speak about anything because it's offensive to them. It hurts people's feelings. They find it to be scary. They find it to be dangerous, right? Speech is very dangerous if it is against their ideology. I mean, I've never understood that concept. Innately, it feels pretty disgusting to me that you can really just criminalize or demonize political speech. It seems anathema to everything that I was raised to think was great about this country. And the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason. And this idea that it's going away from that is troubling. But I think the pendulum swings both directions. And I think big tech is going to see, I don't know how long it's going to take. It might take a year, might take 2 years, might take 5 years, might take 10 years for the movement to re-galvanize. But I think that there are a lot of brilliant people out there who value free speech more than they value going along to get along. And it's just the environment needs to be such that those people are afforded the opportunity to show themselves and to come out and to take a stand. And when that happens, we're going to see a realignment here. And that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get a little bit better. And I've been saying this for a long time here. In my mind, the Republicans largely have been Democrat light. And I've gotten the question for months. Well, what do you think about Section 230? Do you think that the senators, the Republicans are going to do anything about Section 230? And I've been consistent. Absolutely not. We all know they're bought and paid for by Google and Facebook. They control the campaigns. They have more power in many ways than a lot of people in Washington do, right? I mean, Google, Mark Zuckerberg, do you think he's scared of one particular senator? I can probably guess not, right? Because he's got more power than they do. And that is a troubling environment in which to operate. But now, because things got so bad with big tech, that cabal almost is showing some cracks around the seams. And that's not a bad thing, because now we're going to see alternative platforms pop up. We're going to see a diversification of freedom of expression and free speech. And a lot of people are now waking up and going, wait a minute. You know all those people who are complaining about Twitter censorship? Like, think about Tim Pool, right? Remember when, I don't know if you guys ever watched this, but a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, Tim Pool was on the Joe Rogan show with Jack Dorsey and Vidya, I think is her name. Vidya, who is the censor person over at Twitter. And they were all on Joe Rogan's show. And Tim Pool was like going after her. Hey, well, what about this? Why did you ban them? What about that? Why did you ban those people? And so on and so on and so on. And I think he kind of got a little bit of flack for that, because she had good answers. Jack Dorsey had good answers and she had good answers, and they tied it all back to policy, and they were trying to be objective, and they were trying to, justify their way out of it. And they were doing the business techno talk to just say, well, we got, think about all these things. And it sounded pretty good. And Tim Pool sort of was just very aggressive about it. What about this? What about that? What about that? And then I think it kind of came off as like, all right, well, they're trying their best. This whole thing's kind of much ado about nothing. Well, Tim Pool has been 100% proven right, dead right. Years ago, he was saying that they were censoring conservatives. This was a political cabal of tech companies that were trying to craft an elective or an ideological narrative that would serve them in the future in accomplishing their ends. And he was dead right about it. But it took some time for the rest of the country to see that. And so people are sort of awakening out of their bubble and saying, what? You can just do that? You can just cancel them? And I've even talked to other anti-Trumpers and told them what's going on. And they go, that's no way. Like, there's no way. And I look it up. Here's the article. It's from your own news sources. Go read it. And they just go, whoa, that's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. This is a different time, a different world. And once enough people wake up and they start to realize that maybe the people who've been feeding them a bunch of garbage for a long period of time, maybe they don't have their best interests at heart. People are going to wake up, and they're going to wake up with a passion and a fury. And I'm excited for that, because it is nonviolent passion, nonviolent fury. But they're going to wake up, and they're going to get tired of this stuff, because free speech is foundational to the American way of life. And when that's taken away, people are not going to respond well. We have Joel McLaughlin says, I pray Schiff doesn't speak at the impeachment hearings. 2020 was bad enough. That will truly do me in. You mean little Adam shit? Content warning. So little Adam, remember when Donald Trump posted that on Twitter? Little Adam shit, and he said D, California. So he put it in there. He put D, the parentheses, California. So it almost looked like it was an autocorrect, but then it wasn't, because he actually finished, like he was really intentional about, it's hard to write parentheses D hyphen CA and parentheses. You're on your phone. You got to go to the options, the symbols button, and this. So it looked like the theory was that Donald Trump was just sort of riffing through this thing, and the S word came out. But no, that was highly intentional. It was one of the funniest tweets I've ever seen from Donald Trump. And if he speaks, then he speaks. It will be, it shifts over in the House, right? So they already impeached him. He's not in the Senate. So I think his role is done. We have another one from Cripsaleg Transport. Says, that's close to the troop size of Fort Stewart. How are the logistics working to feed and house these troops? It's a good question there. And I was thinking the same thing. There was, remember, they were all sleeping on the floor last week. They were all on the floor. The last pictures I saw, they're actually cots now. So they brought them some cots. And so it feels like the logistics are catching up to the physical presence of the troops, which is good. I mean, what are these guys doing there? Guys and gals, these people, what are they doing there? Just hanging out in the Capitol with guns, with no magazines, no ammunition, with no place to sleep? What is going on? We have Sista says, would you consider being active on Gab? So yeah, actually, I've thought about that. I started an account. I'm a pro now over there at Robert Gruler ESQ is my account. And I have not posted anything yet because the site has just been very slow. I do intend to upload these videos there as well. So I wanted to upload, but I think they have a size limitation. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do that. I think it's a 1 gigabyte limitation in these videos. These streams are very long, so I'm not sure that they'll accommodate us on that size cap, but I may reach out to them and see if they can maybe up our total file size if we, pay for it or something like that. But yeah, I like free speech platforms. I mean, I like them. I don't know where Gab's going to go, but I like the idea that they're independent. I like the idea that they are an alternative. And so I do intend to upload my stuff over there. So you can check that out. But largely, I'll tell you this, the site has just been unusable for me. So until that is resolved, it's probably not going to happen. We have Ryan J says, is it true Trump undid 20 years of pro-China policy? Probably. I don't know how you would quantify that there, Ryan J. I don't know if there's a statistic or a measure or a metric that you could analyze to see, but I would believe that. I mean, Trump has been very hard on China, very, very hard. And I think for good reason. So we'll see if Biden undoes any of that. We have Beth Coddington says, I want to thank you for your calm and easy manner, Robert. Your levity helps. Radical left looks like their heads are about to explode all the time. Yeah, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of, you see people just sort of, remember when you would watch those cartoons and that person's face would just get red and then their ears would just blow smoke out of the sides? I see that a lot on a lot of the news media. People are just very, very amped up about this stuff. Republicans too, Democrats, everybody's just, ready to explode. And, I'm not so sure how necessary that is. Try to have a little bit of fun here. Try to recognize that politics is just, one component of life. The government is not our lives. Politics is not religion. We don't break bread with any of these people. Okay, we have our own lives to live, and my sort of the way I stay grounded on some of this is just remembering that a lot of this stuff is very interesting. I think it's extremely important. I made a whole life and career out of representing people where I think the government overstepped their bounds and started to sort of trample on a lot of people's rights and freedoms, and I would say extended beyond the scope of what we want the government to do. I mean, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. We have an entire team of people here who do that type of work. And so I'm very passionate about it, but I also do recognize that a lot of this political stuff is happening. I'm in Arizona, 3,000 miles away from here. Most of the things that we're concerned about this are probably not going to happen. I gave this analogy last week. A new president comes into office with a list this big of stuff that they want to do, just massive, all this stuff. But by the time they leave office, it's really like this much. They got a couple things done, very minor, some of it not even lasting, right? Like his big policy was Obamacare, right? This groundbreaking policy going to solve healthcare for everybody forever. Trump came in, couple court cases. It's not a tax anymore. Therefore, we can just get rid of the individual mandate, or we can reduce the individual. If the individual mandate was a tax that was authorized by the Supreme Court, we just rolled the tax back down to zero. That makes that provision of the mandate inconsequential. Basically, eliminates the individual mandate. Well, it's like nothing happened. So what happened? What did he do? Right, very little. So if you're gonna sort of apply that same model to Obama's third term, which is what Joe Biden's ultimate term is going to be, then nothing too much to be worried about. We have Cheryl Myers says, since the impeachment is a trial, what power or control, if any, does Chief Justice Roberts have? Similar to criminal court with power to dismiss, maybe on latches? Would be interesting. It would be interesting. I don't think that there are really any rules. It is a political trial. And I'm not even sure if Chief Justice Roberts would be the chief judge on this one. And I think, ordinarily, yes, but if Trump's not in office anymore, then the rules kind of change. And so there's been even some question about that. Is Chief Justice Roberts going to preside over a trial? Would he even want to do that if there's questionable constitutionality over whether this can even take place once he's out of office? So the whole thing is just up in the air. But I guess to your question, if he was the chief judge of this impeachment trial, I don't think that he would dismiss the case. I think he would probably just run it like a political show trial, probably like he did at the last one. Let both sides introduce some moderate amount of evidence, see where it goes, and just let it vote. Remember, I've said this a lot. Courts don't like to get involved in political issues. They call them political questions. They kick them out. So if you wanted to go and sue the government because you hate taxes, the court's going to say, okay, well, so do we. Great. We can't help you with that. That's a political issue. Go talk to your congressperson about that, right? Go talk to your senator. Go send an email to your governor. Don't bring that into court. So I think Chief Justice Roberts would probably handle it the same way. And remember, he did the last one. So you can always look back to that as guidance. Seiji Takahara says, there is always a recourse when there are wrongs that are not addressed. Let us all try to resolve things civilly, though. There is still hope. Yeah, I think civilly is the right way to do it. And there will be other alternatives. There will be other ways that conservatives can assemble and converse and work together towards rebuilding whatever that movement looks like. Lava Java Lava says, viewing it strategically, swelling troops from all of the country attracts foreign countries to liberate. Swelling troops from all of the country attracts foreign countries to liberate. Thank you, Lava. We have another one from CM. What action should one present on the 6th? What action should one present on the 6th take? You available for a brief consultation for questions, recommendations on how to get started. So, CM, the general answer on this is, because I'm not your attorney, obviously, and I cannot give you legal advice. This is a YouTube live stream, and this doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. But the general advice that you would always get would be a situation in which consult with a lawyer. Consult with a lawyer in your local jurisdiction. That is the best idea, right? I'm in Arizona. I don't practice law in D.C., federal court in D.C., or any of those things. Most of those charges are going to be taking place there, unless you're talking about a specific situation that involved an Arizona Capitol Hill something or other. My jurisdiction is in Arizona. I'm also licensed in California, but all this stuff happened in D.C. in that physical geography. And so you would want to talk to a lawyer there, or you in your home state, where if you've already been charged and they may be trying to extradite you or something like that, that's when you would talk to a local attorney. My office is available, of course, if you have any questions about this or any other criminal charge. I can't give you specific advice here, but you can call the office and schedule an appointment. Free case evaluations. Happy to talk with you or anybody about those things. But the general rule is, you got to lawyer up, right? Almost first and foremost, before you talk to anybody on the opposing side. The rule in all criminal law: exercise your right to remain silent, consult with an attorney before you do anything. That's just good advice, regardless of the 6 or any other type of crime. A lot of people think that they can talk their way out of this. Last week, we talked about some other individuals. We went through their affidavits, their complaints, their arrest warrants, and all of that. And they were just open books with the FBI. This is what I did. Here's my social media. Here are the pictures. And they're just talking about everything. And didn't work out too well for them. So the general advice is to talk to an attorney before doing anything else. It's really for any legal problem. It's not just criminal law. People think that, well, I can handle my own car accident, right? And then they totally botch it. They could have saved a ton of money, gotten a bigger settlement if they went with a lawyer. So it's just, I know people have a lot of disdain for lawyers, but it's worth it to at least have a conversation to see if there's something that can be worked out. We have George Katsanakis says, conservatives are screwed. Impeach Pelosi, keep Trump. Conservatives are going to be out in the wilderness for a while. Wolfgang Deo, maybe all of this is just show, and then when Biden is in office, he drops everything like Trump did against Hillary. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he does that. I'm not sure that that he will, but I remember he did do that against Hillary. We have Chris Wolney. Your analysis is promised declass Russia gate docs. Are you saying that just happened? I'd be very curious if that happened. Yeah, I would love to see declassifications about everything. I think he's asking if they would declassify the Russia gate document. So I think, so I did read some of that, Chris. So I talked about this last week. I did read some of the declassifications. I wouldn't say that I found anything that really stuck out to me. And I was looking at something, I think Catherine Herridge was going through it. There were some other people going through it. It was a lot of documentation, but I just didn't, nothing stood out to me that I wanted to cover here today. So it's just not included on the show. We have another one from Chairman of the Board. Reminder, don't forget to wear your pearls Wednesday in tribute to Kamala Harris. Pearl necklace for Kamala's PS. Sorry, I'm late today. Good to see you, Chairman of the Board. Yeah, and so last week he was talking about this concept that there was I think there's a big movement for all of the women. Can I say that? Is that allowed? To wear pearl necklaces during the inauguration. So all of the female Congress people, there's a Facebook page, I think it has like 300,000 likes. Like they all want to wear pearl necklaces for the inauguration, which is very in touch with the American people. It's good stuff. Good to see you, Chairman. Thanks for showing up. We have LD 2020 says, do you think we will finally see the rise of the Libertarian Party? No, I don't. The Libertarian Party, it's funny, the Libertarian Party doesn't like government and organization, and their party shows they don't like organization. They're just terribly organized. And I don't know why, but they have a difficult time finding articulate candidates, people who can come out and articulate some of the philosophies of libertarianism. I think they've got a big road ahead of them if they want to convince people that they can be better off with less government. I think that people are so ingrained into thinking that the government is necessary for their lives to function that unringing that bell is going to be very difficult. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo says, the issue with, quote, I know better than the government is that the government is the only one that can standardize support for the disabled. The only one that can standardize support. So are you talking about the ADA? I guess there's some truth to that, right? Libertarians, I think to some extent believe that there is some role for government. They're not anarchists, but it's just minimal. And so certain standards, like to help the disabled, I think is, maybe not a terrible thing, even though a lot of people have a lot of problems with the ADA. Seiji Takahari says, having a platform to propagate one way is not a platform to communicate two-way. I think that's a good observation. My thought on the Twitter stuff was that Donald Trump is communicating to everybody, but he also has the ability to receive communication, right? He was retweeting people, and he blocked somebody. He got in trouble with the courts. The court said he couldn't block anybody, but the courts haven't said anything about Twitter blocking the president. But he couldn't block people because people, if he was on there sort of availing himself of the public, then presumably he would be willing to accept messages from the American people, which are ultimately all his constituents. And so when he blocked somebody, the court said you can't do that. So, I think the Twitter platform was a little bit two-way, which was my point. If, Twitter, I think, wanted to punish Trump. You don't get to communicate with your people. You're addicted to Twitter. Well, it sort of is missing some key components of the equation. On the other hand, you've got people who want to communicate to Trump, right? Express their displeasure, send him a message, retweet something. So they're sort of communicating to him in a way, but they also want to receive that communication. They may not trust the filter of CNN or MSNBC. They want to hear what Donald Trump had to say specifically. So Twitter banning Trump, it doesn't just hurt Trump, it hurts the 88 million people who are following him to get information. We have TZ1052NY. I'm pretty sure our founders felt the same as they measured their words. We all feel it. There is a disturbance in the force. Yeah, and the founders, I think went through a lot of these same issues. They didn't have ways to communicate. They didn't have a Twitter. They didn't have Facebook. They communicated through pamphlets and the printing press and, organizations. I mean, they were part of, fraternities like the Freemasons and things like that. They had different ways of communicating. And some of that stuff is, you really can't ban some of that. right? You can quarantine people and make sure that they can't leave their homes, but people are going to find a way to communicate and organize with or without Twitter. We have Paul O'Brien says, have you seen the World Economic Forum stuff? No, I have not. I have not seen the World Economic Forum stuff, unless you're talking about some of this. Thanks, Paul O'Brien. Some of this, Great Reset stuff, and I've heard murmurings around it, but I haven't seen much that I know. I'm really waiting to see what Biden does. He's going to get everything's speculation right now. I'm waiting to see what happens. Okay, what are the official documents are? What do they say? What are the intentions? Because then we have stuff that we could talk about. Another one from Chris Wolney says Trump declassed the JFK docs. Last thing he will do. That would be great. I would love to know. I think a lot of Americans would. I think his approval rating would go way up if he did that. Snowden, declassification, Area 51. I'm still hoping for. I know it's not going to happen, folks, but let me have a little bit of fun. Area 51. Let's get it. Are there aliens? I don't know. We have Seiji Takahara. Perhaps the issue is not that people want their candidate in office. They just know there is something bad about that ticket. Rotten fruit. Yeah. Biden just doesn't look well to me. I hope he is well. I hope he does well, because I have less concerns about him than I do with Kamala. We have Misty Siebert. Medical mental disabilities sue Facebook for loss of access to their support groups offered on Facebook during the pandemic. Not just Trump lost access. So that's interesting. Why would Facebook put limits on medical mental disabilities groups? Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's COVID related. Are people talking about COVID stuff? COVID is very sensitive too. You can't talk about anything with COVID. Otherwise, they'll ban you. It's too dangerous. So I'm not sure why some of those people would have lost access, but it is interesting. We have another one. Cheryl Myers says, time to go back to transistor radios and get Radio Free America broadcasts over the free airwaves. Yeah, you may see some of that, right? Ham radios, and there are different internet protocols and things that people will get creative. I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. I hope it doesn't, but certainly people are going to communicate and organize regardless of what big tech does. So I'm just not too worried about it. It's concerning. I say that as somebody who is, free speech is one of the most fundamental values I think we have here in this country. And if that is removed, we lose. Everything else sort of is a domino effect from that, right? If you don't have the ability to speak, then what? Everything else gets bad. It's so fundamental. There's a reason it's number one in our Bill of Rights. We have another one. TPRFDF51 says Jack Murphy is a former Special Forces operator who has been there, done that, creds, and a mind able to critically analyze what's going on in the world around us. He'd make a great congressman. Yeah, he's a great follow on Twitter. He posted a thread about this, about what's going on in D.C., and he was pretty fair about it, right? He was saying, and his conclusion was exactly sort of what I was feeling, just like, what? This doesn't make any sense. So if a former Special Forces operator who has been there and done that and knows how this stuff works is also sort of scratching his head wondering what's going on, then I think we're in good company. Thanks for the information there, TPRDFH51. We have another one from Wolfgang says, yes, I am very, very tired of having to be in the position I am in, all this censorship and malfeasance and just disgusting historical things forsaken. Well, hang in there, Wolfgang. I know that right now a lot of people are feeling the same way. A lot of people are feeling down, a little bit depressed, because it feels like the world is closing in a little bit, right? It kind of does feel like that. It feels like there's a lot of information and a lot of things that people aren't telling us. What's happening in D.C., why all of this hubbub, with all these troops, and what's going on? Is there something else going on or not? And then there's also this sort of lingering uncertainty about a new administration. And this happens, I think, every 4 years, at least when there's a new president. Everybody's just concerned. What's going to happen? It's a transition. It's like moving homes, right? Moving from one house to another is like one of the most stressful things that you can do in your life. Like literally, I think it's in the top 3. It's public speaking, number 1, dying is like number 2, and then moving is like number 3. Most stressful things. And so think about this as a move. Okay, somebody that you know and you appreciate is in the house and they're leaving. Somebody else is moving in. It's stressful. So hang tight. It's all gonna, I think, settle down here in a little bit. We're almost over the hill. Wednesday's gonna be here, and we'll just keep moving on. Hope you're well there, Wolfgang. Liberty or Death says, remember when the mayor of D.C., quote, evicted the National Guard last summer, citing Third Amendment, even though the National Guard paid for hotels, hypocrisy incarnate. Yeah, and yeah, that's Mayor Bowser. Mayor Bowser was the same woman who sent a letter on January 5th saying we don't need any more help. We're good. DC's good. We have the Metro PD, the Capitol Hill Police. We're all good. Don't even worry about it. So, her judgment is a little bit questionable in my mind, and it's also highly political. She has been somebody who's been very, very anti-Donald Trump, and city's kind of a mess right now. So good luck to her. I hope the inauguration goes off without a hitch, and I genuinely mean that. I don't want to see anything go bad. We have Chris Wolning, possibility that federal thought enforcement agency coming. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the next logical step. If you have a lot of people who have dangerous thoughts and they do dangerous things, and you can't police the dangerous things, you got to police the dangerous thoughts. Kind of trending in that direction, aren't we, Chris? Scary thoughts. Las Vegas Retired says, calling people white supremacists is a major insult to a lot of people. It should be, right? Unless you're a white supremacist. If you're a white supremacist, then you'd probably say, yeah, I am, right? Great. But for everybody else, like myself, who think that that is an abhorrent thought and the idea is repulsive to the core, yeah, it's an insult. It's a big insult. People saying that, even people have said I'm racist and stuff like that. It's so insulting. It's not true. So doesn't make it less insulting, though. I think that them calling every single one of Trump's supporters a white supremacist or an insurrectionist or a racist or any of those things is not accurate. It's unfair. It's repulsive. And it's not, I don't think it's going to play out well for him. Brian Reinhardt says, Biden reminds me of Henry Kane from Poltergeist 2. I don't know that movie, but I know the Poltergeist movies were like in the 80s, I think. And that sounds about right? Joe Biden's, he was kind of at the climax during the 80s when he passed the crime bills, and the 90s when he passed the crime bills. A little bit past his prime, I would say. Seiji Takahari says, where can I find declassified documents released to the public? Could you possibly create a splash page that organizes and directs people to where it is? So Seiji, the way that we organize this stuff is it's in our slides. So the slides are available for you at the end of the program. You can download them in our Discord server. So if I cover anything that you want, it's all in there in the slides on a regular basis. But no, I mean, generally, there are a lot of websites that will cover some of this stuff. Scribed.com, people usually upload stuff there. Courtlistener.org, I think, is another one. You can get a lot of court documents on there. But I'm not sure that Court Listener is going to have any declassified stuff. There's some document hubs where people will upload a lot of things to. That's kind of where I would go if you wanted to get the latest documents. FBI, I think even the FBI.gov website has a lot of declassification links. You can just go download them right from the FBI if you want. Wolfgang Deo says the Great Reset may work by trying to kill the U.S. dollar. As such, that may be why printing money hasn't led to hyperinflation yet. Plausible, not good. Yeah, plausible, not good. And our last super chat looks like it's coming in here. A question. Where the heck is Steven Crowder? Ooh, where the heck is Steven Crowder? I don't know. Is he not around? That would be problematic. I hope he's still on YouTube. He's got a big channel over there. If Steven Crowder falls, then they may be just coming down the pike for some other ones. We have our last one now. I was wrong. We have a last one from the infamous Wolfgang Deo. Says, oh, I am peachy, listening while looking through the Linux kernel 0.01 code. However, I have been in this position for 5 years, so, well, it's all good. Well, Wolfgang, I don't know. I don't know if you've been looking at the Linux kernel 0.01 for 5 years. How much code is in 0.01? It's like the earliest version of the software. And we have another one from Seiji Takahari. Says, I love your slides. I was curious about a master splash page. So we don't have a master splash page. You know, we use some software called Monday. Monday.org, Monday.com. We were thinking about maybe organizing some things in there and then making those publicly available. They're sort of like spreadsheets, but you can go in and add documents and converse. Maybe we'll think about that. It's kind of a lot of work to maintain that stuff. You know, stuff changes so rapidly, but if there was enough interest in that, you know, if we could get something organized in the Discord, it's not something that I have the ability to just constantly monitor and update and all of that stuff. But if there was a community endeavor to help curate a list of declassified documents or arrests from Capitol Hill or impeachment articles or whatever it is, I'd be open to facilitating that, but I just don't have the bandwidth to go in there and organize all of that stuff. But it's a good suggestion there. We have Chris Wolney says, when words hurt, everything is, quote, dangerous. Yeah, everything is dangerous. I'm seeing that word a lot out there. A lot of articles, a lot of people talking about it. CNN's talking about it. Dangerous this, dangerous this, dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Is it really dangerous? What is it dangerous to? Is it dangerous because people might think differently? I don't know what's so dangerous about that. Or is it dangerous because somebody might do something bad because they heard some scary words? Okay, was it the words that caused them to be scary? Were these people already inclined to do that stuff? And what is the bad thing that you're so afraid of? Yes, storming the Capitol building and killing people, that's pretty dangerous. But did Donald Trump cause that? I think that the relationship there is tenuous at best. Another one from Brandon Brown. Crowder takes off Christmas. Also, the Black Vault is the largest declassified docs in one spot. There you go. Boom. There you go. So there you go, Seji. The Black Vault is the largest declassified docs in one spot, which I've never even heard of. That's outstanding. Thank you for that. I'm going to have fun with that one. Crowder takes off Christmas. Is today Christmas? Is he off today? And we have a couple more. One from Wolfgang says, oh, could I be your librarian? I'll allow it, Wolfgang. Absolutely. Joe Sosnowski says, DNI says CIA covered up suppressed interference. I saw that. I read a little bit of that article today. Yeah, that was from DNI Ratcliffe. So if you recall, DNI Ratcliffe is the director of national intelligence, and that is sort of the clearinghouse for all of the other intelligence agencies. It's actually very interesting. You have the CIA, FBI, DHS, all of them, right? Like 12, 13 of them. And the DNI is sort of the clearinghouse there. So sort of the one organization that is monitoring all of the other organizations. And he came out and he said, yeah, well, the CIA, we knew that there was Chinese involvement in this last election. The CIA came out and said that, they didn't want to bring this to anybody's attention because they didn't like the policies that were in place against China. And therefore, there was this disagreement over that Director of National Intelligence report. If you recall, Trump in 2018 issued an executive order that was intended to have a report drafted on his desk by December 18th, 45 days after the national election. That was a report from all of the different intelligence agency heads detailing how foreign election interference occurred. And it was sort of in response to what happened in 2016 with the Russian collusion and all that stuff. So the EO came out in 2018. We were supposed to have the report on December 18th. They bumped that out until after January 6th. And then finally, we're just getting some little tidbits about it. I still have not seen the original underlying report, but we do see that Ratcliffe was saying, yeah, I mean, they were trying to suppress a lot of information. So, now you've got multiple intelligence agencies sort of duking it out with one another. You're going to see the same political divide that we see elsewhere in the country. You're going to see the people who say there's nothing there. They're saying DNI Ratcliffe was just a Trump sycophant. And then you have the Trump people saying, well, DNI Ratcliffe is telling the truth. The FBI, CIA, the intelligence apparatus in this country, they're the ones who are all compromised. They didn't cover Hunter Biden. They didn't cover, they didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton for the email stuff. They're all bought and paid for. They were the ones who promulgated the Steele dossier and the Russian collusion hoax and all of that stuff. So now you've got both sides of the aisle saying the other side is wrong. And I'm not sure we're going to get to any synthesis or any conclusion. And lastly, folks, but not leastly, very simple exercising pair from Helen Alera. Thank you, Helen. She says, keep it up, and we intend to, and we hope that you join us. This is the end of this program, but we'll be back here tomorrow. Want to invite you before we sign off to subscribe to the channel. If you have not already done so, we go live every day of the week at every weekday at 5 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, 4 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. right down Central Time. I want to remind you a couple other things that we are going to put the slides in the Discord server, so you can come check us out there. It's available for you for free. You can get a copy of my book right here. It's called Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. There it is. And you can download a free copy of this thing. It is a PDF in the Discord if you want to buy it. It's available for you on Amazon. You can also grab a copy of my Existence System. This is a little personal productivity system that I made a video about on January 1st. You can check that out on this channel. It's not political, but if you're interested in sort of some productivity things that I do, you can check that out. That is also available there. And let's see, what else? I want to thank Ma for helping us to moderate this channel and keep things nice and civil. I want to thank Miss Faith for doing an outstanding job with some of the show prep today. And I want to thank all of you for being here. We're in for a wild week. It's going to be very interesting. I'm hopeful it's very peaceful and very civil. And we're going to see a transition from one president to another. And we're going to see how that goes. It's going to be an interesting couple days. I think we're going to see a lot of activity Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And nobody really knows what it's looking like. So we're hopeful that you join us as we go into that. One more reminder to subscribe. One quick last thought. If you know anybody in the state of Arizona who's been charged with a crime, that's what we do. That's my day job. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. Got an awesome team here at our firm, the R&R Law Group. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona. We offer free case evaluations. We're very good at what we do. We love to help people who've been charged with a crime, good people, get through the justice system and find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their lives, and we would be honored and humbled if you trusted us enough to send a referral our direction. We'll take very good care of them. Other than that, my friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you right back here tomorrow, same time, 5 p.m. Arizona time, 4 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. Everybody sleep well, sleep tight. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.